The night was quiet in a way that felt both heavy and alive, as though the air itself was holding its breath. The Smith household rested in uneasy silence, each room dimmed by the soft weight of sleep or the attempt of it. But in the garage, tucked at the edge of the house like a secret pocket, there was still light. Not the harsh white blaze of fluorescent lamps, but a wavering glow, golden and irregular, the sort of light one might expect from a lantern or a candle. Rick sat hunched on a stool, shoulders curved forward, his frame like a tired question mark carved out against the dim hum of machines. Before him, an invention pulsed faintly, bathing the clutter of tools and bottles in a light that seemed to ripple like water. It wasn't like the sparks of his usual work. This glow carried a softness, an almost fragile tenderness, as if the machine itself had been built not for power but for quiet company. His eyes, sharp and weary, reflected the glow. There was something else in them too, a shimmer not entirely made of intellect or drink. It was a glance that carried both sorrow and care, like a laugh that comes after tears. He leaned back slightly, the flask in his hand turning lazily, untouched for once. It was at that moment that Morty stepped into the garage. He had not meant to wander down, not really. But sometimes the silence of the house pressed too hard, and he found himself moving toward where Rick usually was, drawn as much by instinct as by curiosity. His bare feet made no sound on the cold floor, and when he paused at the threshold, the strange light washed over his face. For a moment he only stood there, blinking at the sight of his grandfather. There was no explosion, no rant, no frenzy, just Rick, sitting quietly before a glow that looked almost alive. It startled Morty in a different way than usual. Not a shock of chaos, but a strange, calming tug at his chest. Rick?" Morty's voice was soft, nearly swallowed by the hum. Rick didn't turn right away. He let the silence breathe a little longer, as though deciding whether to break it. Then, with the smallest shift of his head, he acknowledged Morty. His reply wasn't sharp or impatient, only low, threaded with an odd kind of weariness. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" Morty shook his head, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe he could have slept, but something had pulled him here. Something about the way the house had felt too still, and how the faint glow through the garage window had seemed like a whisper, calling him closer. He stepped in slowly, the air cooler here, tinged with the metallic scent of wires and machines. The hum of the device was steady, like the quiet thrum of a heart. Morty's eyes traced it, watching the way the light seemed to shimmer as if breathing. "What is it?" he asked, but his voice carried no urgency. Instead, it sounded like a child asking about a bedtime story, curious but calm. Rick exhaled softly, not quite a sigh, more like a breath he'd been holding without noticing. He tapped the side of the machine gently, and the glow shifted in response, dimming and then swelling again. "Just something I've been working on," he said. His words were plain, but there was a tenderness buried beneath them, like a secret not meant to be spoken too loudly. Morty moved closer, drawn to the quiet beauty of it. The invention didn't buzz or spark or threaten to explode. It simply glowed, steady and rhythmic, as though it had found a way to hold part of the night within itself. He felt no fear, only a gentle wonder, the kind that made his chest expand and soften at the same time. Rick finally looked at him. His expression caught somewhere between a smirk and something sadder, something older. "You ever notice, Morty," he began, his tone surprisingly measured, "how sometimes the silence is louder than all the noise in the world?" Morty blinked, unsure how to answer. But in the hush of the garage, with that glow painting both their faces, he thought he understood. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of waiting, of meaning, of something too soft to name. He didn't speak, but Rick didn't seem to need him to. The moment was enough. For a while, neither of them moved. Morty sank down onto an old stool near Rick's, his small frame mirroring his grandfather's hunched posture. The light cradled them both, wrapping them in a strange, unexpected peace. The garage, usually cluttered with chaos, felt different tonight. The scattered bottles and tangled wires looked almost gentle beneath the shifting glow, like shadows cast on the walls of a cave where stories are told by firelight. Morty let his gaze wander, then return always to the machine. It felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. Not alive like a person, but alive like a lullaby, soft, repeating, endless. "Does it do something?" Morty finally asked, voice low, almost as though he didn't want to disturb the glow. Rick chuckled faintly, but it wasn't mocking. It was tired, warm, a sound rare and fragile. Everything does something, Morty. Even nothing does something. Morty tilted his head, confused, but smiled a little despite himself. It was the kind of thing Rick said all the time, cryptic, too big for him to fully grasp. But tonight it didn't frustrate him. Tonight it felt like the words themselves were meant to soothe, not to teach. Rick leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Sometimes I build things just to keep me company. Doesn't have to blow up or solve the universe. Sometimes it just has to glow. The honesty of it struck Morty, though he wasn't sure why. It was unusual to hear Rick admit to such softness, but in this quiet night it felt natural, almost necessary. The boy's chest swelled with something unnameable, a mix of sadness and safety, like standing under a star-filled sky and realizing how small you are, but also how held. Neither spoke again for a long time. They simply sat, two figures in the hum of the night, bound not by words but by the steady pulse of light. Morty's eyes grew heavier as the glow lulled him into calm, and Rick, though awake, seemed softened too. His flask resting forgotten at his side, the night hummed on, steady and patient, as though it had been waiting for this very moment. Rick and Morty, not lost in chaos or chased by absurdity, but held quietly in the silence of an invention that asked for nothing but to be seen. And somewhere in that silence, Morty realized, perhaps without fully knowing it, that even Rick's sadness could be gentle, and even his chaos could be kind. The glow swelled once more, then dimmed as if breathing with them. And in that rhythm, the night wrapped them both in its arms. A grandfather and his grandson, sitting in the hum of silence that felt strangely like home. The glow from Rick's machine had quieted into something like a steady lantern by the time Morty blinked back into wakefulness. He hadn't fully fallen asleep, just drifted, the way one drifts while listening to rain on the roof. When his eyes opened again, Rick was still there, hands moving with surprising precision, adjusting knobs and turning delicate dials with the kind of care Morty rarely saw from him. The boy rubbed his eyes. "You're still working on it?" he asked, voice soft and scratchy with sleep. Rick glanced sideways, his expression unreadable. "Not working," he muttered. "Listening," Morty frowned, puzzled. Machines were usually loud, full of sparks and noise. But this one seemed almost shy. Its hum was subtle, its light more like breathing than electricity. Listening to what? Rick didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a remote. It wasn't like the other gadgets Morty had seen before. This one looked simpler, almost fragile. Its casing was dull silver, its buttons faintly worn, as though they'd been pressed not with urgency but with thought. Morty leaned closer. "What does it do?" Rick turned the remote in his hand, as if weighing whether the boy was ready to see. Then, with a slow press of his thumb, the hum of the machine shifted. The glow deepened, flickering once before spilling across the garage wall. Shapes formed in the light, not clear, not sharp, but like reflections glimpsed in rippling water. Morty gasped. The shapes grew more defined, faint outlines of people, places, moments that felt both strange and familiar. It was like watching dreams projected on the wall, fragile and fleeting. Rick didn't look at him. His gaze was fixed on the shimmering images. "Not every remote controls things, Morty," he said softly. "Some just open doors." Morty tilted his head, watching as the shifting shapes began to resemble people laughing, then fading, then returning as tears. It wasn't like television. It wasn't chaotic or loud. It was quiet, almost reverent. "Doors to what?" Rick pressed another button. The images changed. Now a group of figures around a table sharing food, their laughter faint but warm. Then a woman looking out a window, her eyes carrying both love and regret. Morty felt a tug at his chest. These weren't adventures or battles. They were feelings captured and replayed like channels on an invisible spectrum. "Doors," Rick finally said, his voice low, "to everything we don't say out loud." Morty's eyes widened. He wasn't afraid, only deeply curious. The images weren't frightening. They were tender even when they carried sadness. Each flicker was like opening a page in a diary that didn't belong to him, but somehow spoke to him anyway. Rick pressed the remote again. The images swirled, becoming a man and a child walking side by side, their hands brushing but never fully clasping. Morty's chest tightened. Something about it felt like him and Rick, though he couldn't explain why. "Why'd you make this?" Morty whispered. Rick gave a small, humorless chuckle, but there was no sharpness in it. "Sometimes you get tired of universes exploding, Morty. Sometimes you just want to remember what it feels like to laugh at the right time. Cry at the right time." Morty let the words sink in. He thought about all the times Rick's inventions had been dangerous, overwhelming, chaotic. But this felt different. This machine wasn't built to control or conquer. It was built to feel. Rick pressed another button, and this time Morty saw a woman who looked a little like Beth, only older, smiling softly as she fixed a child's blanket. The child turned, eyes half closed, drifting to sleep. The image flickered but lingered, like an ember refusing to die. Morty swallowed hard. "That looks like—" "Yeah," Rick said, quickly cutting him off, though his voice was quieter than usual. "It does." They sat in silence for a while, watching as the channels of feelings shifted one into another, laughter into sighs, regret into comfort, absurdity into tenderness. Each one passed like a dream, impossible to hold but leaving behind a faint warmth, the way a lullaby lingers even when the tune is gone. Morty hugged his knees to his chest. "It doesn't scare me," he admitted softly. Rick raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Doesn't, huh?" Morty shook his head. "It feels safe, like a story Mom used to tell me before bed. You don't remember all the details, but you remember how it made you feel." Rick stared at him for a long moment, then looked back at the glow. His face softened in a way Morty rarely saw. "That's the point, Morty. Sometimes you don't need the details. Sometimes you just need the feeling to stick." The remote clicked again, and Morty giggled quietly despite himself. On the wall an image appeared of something utterly ridiculous. A man with spaghetti for hair slipping on his own noodles. It was absurd, yet the laughter it brought wasn't harsh. It was gentle, almost like the laughter you share with someone you trust. Rick smirked faintly. "See, not all doors lead to heavy stuff. Some just lead to nonsense. And sometimes nonsense is exactly what you need." Morty leaned his head against the side of the stool, his eyelids growing heavy again. The glow washed over him, warm and steady, the images shifting like dreams passing through clouds. He felt both smaller and safer, as though the machine was rocking him gently toward sleep. Rick noticed, though he didn't say anything. He simply let the channels drift on, softer and softer, until the garage felt less like a workshop and more like a quiet den beneath a starry sky. At last, Morty whispered, his voice slurring with drowsiness, "It's like you built a remote to other feelings." Rick turned toward him then, his gaze holding something unspoken. For once, he didn't correct him or make a joke. He just let the words hang there, true and simple. The glow dimmed, then swelled again, matching Morty's slow breaths. Rick leaned back, remote resting in his hand, and allowed the silence to wrap them both. The invention hummed on, its light flickering like a lantern for two travelers who had paused their journey just long enough to remember that even in infinite chaos, there are moments of quiet worth holding on to. The night outside pressed gently against the garage walls, and for a little while time itself seemed to soften, like a blanket tucked around the two of them. And though neither said it, both understood. This was no ordinary invention. It was a remote not for control but for connection, for the fragile, fleeting feelings that make silence hum louder than any noise. And under that hum, Morty's eyes slipped closed again while Rick, still awake, let the glow reflect quietly in his tired eyes. The night lingered, hushed and heavy, wrapping the Smith household in its quiet cloak. In the garage, the invention's glow pulsed like a soft heartbeat, throwing light against the shelves stacked with forgotten tools and half-finished contraptions. Rick sat slouched, eyes fixed on the machine, but his attention seemed far away, as though the glow had pulled him into some unspoken memory. Beside him, Morty stirred. He hadn't meant to wake again. Sleep kept tugging at him like a tide drawing him back out to sea. But the images from the remote had settled into his chest, warm and puzzling. He blinked, his face still slack with drowsiness, and turned toward Rick. "Rick," he whispered, almost as if afraid to disturb the quiet. Can I see more?" Rick raised an eyebrow. "More what, Morty?" His voice wasn't sharp. It carried the soft rasp of someone too tired to argue. "More of the channels," Morty said. He hugged his knees again, his curiosity pulling him gently awake. I don't want to watch explosions or crazy adventures right now. I don't know. I just want to see the feelings. Rick studied him for a moment. Morty's eyes were heavy-lidded, his voice slow and sincere. It wasn't the usual frantic curiosity that got him into trouble. This was different. This was soft, like a child asking for one more story before bed. Rick exhaled, long and quiet, and pressed a button on the remote. The glow shifted once again. On the wall appeared an image of a little girl crouching in a meadow, holding a dandelion close to her lips. She blew, and the seeds scattered like tiny stars into the night air. Her laughter followed, gentle and fleeting. Morty's breath caught. That's nice. The image faded, replaced by another. A man sitting alone at a kitchen table staring at a half-empty mug. His expression was tired, but when a cat jumped onto the table and rubbed against his hand, he smiled faintly. The loneliness softened. Morty tilted his head. It's like the machine knows the in-between stuff. The stuff you don't usually notice. Rick didn't look at him, but his voice came low, steady. Most people don't. They think the big things matter, but sometimes it's the half-empty mugs and the dandelions that stick with you. Morty considered that, watching the images shift again. A group of kids lay on a rooftop, staring up at the stars. None of them said a word. They didn't have to. The silence was enough. He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. Do you ever wish we could go into them? Not just watch, but actually feel what they feel. Rick hesitated, thumb hovering over the remote. For a moment his eyes flickered with something unguarded. No, he said finally, but the word didn't sound convincing. It's better to keep distance, safer. Morty's brows knit. But wouldn't it make us understand people better? Rick's lips twitched into a faint, crooked smile. Look at you, Morty. You're half asleep and you're still trying to learn about empathy. Morty flushed but didn't argue. He just kept watching as the images passed. Small gestures, quiet moments. The kinds of scenes that never made headlines, but somehow lived forever in the corners of memory. At last, Morty said, It makes me feel like we're not so different from everybody else. Even if there's infinite universes, infinite versions of people, they all laugh, they all get lonely, they all care. Rick finally looked at him, then really looked. Morty's expression was soft, eyes glassy with the heaviness of sleep, but alive with wonder. It reminded Rick of something he rarely let himself remember, the curiosity he once had as a child, before it had hardened into cynicism. You know, Rick said slowly, most people spend their whole lives running from those kinds of thoughts. You're sitting here asking for more of them. Morty shrugged weakly, a yawn sneaking out. I guess I like how it feels. Makes the garage not so scary. Makes you not so scary. The words hit harder than Morty probably meant them to. Rick froze, the remote heavy in his hand. For once, he didn't have a sharp comeback. He only looked away, pressing another button to mask the silence. The wall flickered again, showing now a pair of hands knitting slowly in the glow of a fireplace. The wool slipped, the person frowned, then laughed at themselves, starting over. Morty chuckled sleepily, the sound soft and contagious. I like that one, he murmured. Rick nodded faintly, his throat too tight for words. Time passed like that, one channel, then another. Morty's curiosity was steady but gentle, like a child lifting seashells one by one, marveling at each before setting it down. He didn't demand answers or explanations. He simply wanted to see, to feel, to be present in the quiet unfolding of moments. At one point, Morty asked, Rick, do you think feelings are like universes? Like infinite? Rick sighed, but it wasn't a dismissive sigh. It was the kind of sigh that comes when you're caught off guard by a question you can't quite laugh off. So yeah, Morty, infinite and just as messy. Morty smiled faintly, eyelids fluttering. That's kinda nice. Means there's always more to find. Rick didn't answer. He just let the boy drift back into the glow, his curiosity easing into drowsy wonder. The channels softened with him, their edges blurring, their colors dimming. Soon the images looked less like stories and more like dreams, ungraspable yet comforting. Morty's voice came one last time, slow and thick with sleep. Thanks, Rick, for showing me. Rick swallowed, his chest tightening in ways he didn't like to acknowledge. He cleared his throat. Don't thank me, Morty, just sleep. Morty's head lolled to the side, and within moments his breathing steadied into the rhythm of rest. Rick stayed awake, remote still in hand, staring at the fading glow. Morty's gentle curiosity had stirred something old, something Rick had buried long ago. He told himself it didn't matter, that it was just another invention, another night. But somewhere beneath the armor of his cynicism, he felt it, the quiet truth that sometimes the softest questions open the deepest doors. And so he sat there, in the hush of the garage, letting the hum of infinite feelings wash over him. He didn't change the channel. He didn't need to. The garage door was half open, letting in a thin line of night air that smelled faintly of grass and summer dust. The glow from Rick's invention stretched out like a soft invitation, spilling into the hall where the rest of the family lingered. It wasn't loud or alarming. It was more like the warm hum of a lullaby, drawing them closer without urgency. Beth was the first to pause, hearing the faint flicker of light. She had been wandering restlessly, as she often did on nights when the house felt too full of silence. When she saw the glow spilling from the garage, something tugged at her. For once, it wasn't Rick's chaos she expected to find there. It was something quieter, something she couldn't yet name. Jerry trailed behind, uncertain. He never quite knew whether following Beth into Rick's domain would make him useful or foolish. But the glow seemed harmless, almost comforting, and so he followed, hoping maybe tonight would be different. Summer appeared last, arms crossed as if to shield herself from disappointment. She had seen enough of Rick's inventions to assume trouble, but the soundless shimmer was different. There was no buzz of explosions or frantic shouting. It felt still. And curiosity, even when she resisted it, tugged at her too. They entered together quietly, as though stepping into a room where someone was sleeping. Inside, they found Rick slouched in his chair, flask forgotten at his side. Morty leaned against the workbench, already half asleep, his face soft and open in the television's glow. The invention flickered gently, showing no explosions, no grotesque creatures, only shifting images of lives being lived in small, tender fragments. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the machine filled the silence, steady as breath. Beth took a seat first, lowering herself into a chair near Morty. Her eyes softened at the sight of him, her son, so often caught between fear and bewilderment, now calm, his head tilted slightly as though listening to a bedtime story. She turned to Rick, her voice unusually quiet. "What is this?" Rick didn't look up right away. His gaze remained fixed on the flickering images, as if afraid they might disappear if he turned away. Finally he muttered, "Just channels from other places." Not important, but Beth didn't believe him. She saw the way his shoulders relaxed in the glow, the way his voice lost its usual edge. She looked at the screen and the images shifted. A woman walking her dog beneath street lamps. A father teaching his daughter how to skip stones. A group of strangers sharing food at a long wooden table. Summer moved closer, lowering her arms. Her eyes reflected the glow as she whispered, "It's not like the usual stuff you show, it's softer." Rick huffed but didn't argue. Jerry, hesitant at first, pulled up a stool. He expected to feel left out, as he often did, but instead the images seemed to speak to him too. One channel showed a man fumbling with his words on a date, his awkwardness almost painful to watch, until his partner smiled and reached across the table, making it clear that imperfection was welcome. Jerry's shoulders loosened. For once he didn't feel mocked. The family settled gradually, each finding their place in the glow. They didn't bicker, didn't raise their voices. They simply sat, as though the invention had created a small island of peace where arguments couldn't find them. Morty stirred faintly, eyes fluttering open for a moment. When he saw his family gathered, he didn't panic or groan. He just smiled weakly, mumbling, "You came too," before drifting back into the edge of sleep. Beth's heart ached at the words, simple as they were. It struck her that Morty had been carrying so much lately, following Rick into dangers she couldn't fully imagine. And yet here, with the family near, he seemed lighter. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her hand lingering just a moment longer than usual. Summer leaned forward, resting her chin in her palm. She wasn't used to seeing her family like this. No raised voices, no sharp comments. Just quiet. She let herself relax into it, feeling the odd safety of being together without expectation. Jerry risked a glance at Beth. She didn't turn away this time. Their eyes met, not with passion or drama, but with a quiet recognition. They were still here, still part of something larger than themselves. Rick pretended not to notice any of it. He fiddled with the remote, watching the flickers shift. But somewhere deep inside, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Pride, maybe. Relief. Or perhaps just a rare stillness that came when his family didn't look at him with suspicion, but with trust. The channels continued. A child falling asleep on a library floor with a book open on his chest. An elderly couple holding hands as they waited for a bus. A teenager sketching stars into the margin of her homework. Small moments, but they carried a weight that words couldn't. The Smith family breathed together, their rhythms unconsciously syncing. The garage, usually a place of noise and sparks, became a sanctuary of silence and light. Rick finally muttered, almost to himself, "Don't get used to it. This isn't what I do," but his voice lacked conviction. The glow betrayed him, showing a version of himself in another world, one where his inventions were less about power and more about memory, more about connection. Beth saw it, and though she didn't speak, she understood. Summer saw it too, her expression softening. Jerry, even in his own uncertainty, felt something like belonging. And Morty, though half asleep, sensed it as well. He shifted, letting his head rest against Beth's arm, comforted by the presence of everyone near. For one night, the garage was not a place of danger. It was not the staging ground for wild experiments or catastrophic mistakes. It was simply a room where a family, broken, imperfect, often distant, could sit together in the quiet glow of infinite possibilities. The invention hummed on, steady as a heartbeat, and the night deepened around them. The garage had grown warmer with their presence, though the night outside deepened into soft shadows that pulled gently against the walls. The glow from Rick's invention bathed the family in a quiet light, and Morty, nestled against Beth, felt the familiar tug of curiosity mixed with drowsiness. The images on the screen were no longer just strange glimpses. They had taken on a rhythm, a gentle heartbeat that invited both laughter and reflection. Rick's hand hovered over the remote, fingers brushing the smooth surface, as if he were about to coax the machine into revealing yet another world. He pressed a button lightly, and the flicker of images began again. This time the scenes held a peculiar balance, absurdity wrapped in subtle melancholy, humor tinged with sadness, like clouds reflecting the last glow of sunset. Morty's eyes widened softly. A commercial appeared first, a man enthusiastically selling doors that led nowhere. He held each handle as if the act was sacred, smiling broadly at the camera, while behind him the floors seemed to stretch endlessly into an indistinct void. Morty couldn't help a quiet giggle, the kind of laugh that felt safe and unhurried. But as he watched, he noticed the man's smile faltered when he looked away from the camera, and the laughter that followed carried a note of loneliness. "It's kind of funny," Morty whispered, "but also sad." Rick's eyes were fixed on the screen, but the edge of his smirk softened almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, Morty. That's the thing about this place. Chaos doesn't have to scream. Sometimes it whispers." Summer leaned forward, resting her chin in her hands. She had always been drawn to the edges of humor and cruelty, sharp and observant. Yet tonight, the faint laughter that intertwined with sorrow seemed different. It wasn't mocking or cruel, it was tender, ephemeral, as if the universe itself was sharing a secret joke at the expense of no one. Beth's gaze lingered on the screen, watching an image of a man juggling sandwiches that floated above his head like small clouds. He dropped one and it spun slowly, falling onto the floor with a muted thud. The man looked both frustrated and bemused, then shrugged and laughed softly to himself. The scene made Beth chuckle quietly, but her eyes misted over. She could see herself in the fleeting imperfection, in the small mistakes that didn't matter to anyone but the person living them. Jerry, surprisingly, found comfort in the absurdity. A sketch appeared of a dog wearing a tiny hat, attempting to balance a teacup on its head. It stumbled, wobbled, and fell. Instead of the ridicule he expected, the dog wagged its tail and tried again. Jerry laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that felt unfamiliar to him but warm in its honesty. For once he did not feel outside. Even foolishness had a place, he realized, even in the most chaotic corners of the cosmos. Morty shifted slightly, leaning into Beth's arm. "It's funny, but also makes me feel soft," he murmured. "Like everything doesn't have to be big or scary. Even weird things can be gentle." Rick's smirk deepened into something more reflective. He fiddled with the remote, but didn't change the channel yet. For a man accustomed to controlled chaos and cynical humor, he found it oddly comforting to witness his family laughing without sharp edges. It was quieter, subtler than any of his inventions had ever intended, yet somehow more profound. The channels flowed gently, each segment a small universe unto itself. One showed a child drawing stars on the walls of a dimly lit room. The stars glowed faintly, illuminating the child's face in shades of soft blue and lavender. Another image revealed an elderly couple sitting side by side on a bench, speaking in whispers that could not be heard over the soft hum of night. Yet their hands were intertwined, communicating more than words ever could. Summer's voice broke the quiet. "I like this. It's not trying to be smart or cool. It's just life." Morty nodded, eyes heavy. "Yeah, and it feels like even when things are messy, it's okay. You can laugh and cry at the same time. That's normal." Beth's chest lifted slightly. "I never thought I'd see Jerry like this," she said softly. She turned her head and caught him smiling quietly, the corners of his eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. In that fleeting moment, the fragile family seemed whole. Rick finally spoke, low and contemplative. "Morty, you ever notice that the stuff that makes you laugh sometimes stings a little too? Like there's a thread of sadness in everything funny?" Morty nodded, sleepy but attentive. "Yeah, like the man with the sandwiches. He's silly, but he's also human." Rick's gaze softened, a rare warmth settling in his chest. "Exactly. Empathy's just the ability to notice the in-between stuff. That's what I'm showing you. That's what tonight's for." Morty's small smile was tired but genuine. "I get it. It's not just funny or sad. It's both. And that makes it nicer somehow." The family settled further into the glow, shoulders relaxing, breath synchronizing with the gentle hum of the machine. Laughter arose again, soft and collective, not loud, not forced, but like chimes ringing faintly in a quiet forest. The edges of their fatigue softened, their worries muted, the channels slowed, blurring into one another. A montage appeared, a child hugging a pillow tightly, a woman staring out a rain-speckled window, a cat curling up beside an elderly man. Morty's eyes drooped, the gentle sadness and quiet humor wrapping around him like a blanket. Rick leaned back, finally taking a slow sip from his flask. He didn't need to explain or justify. The invention had done its work, showing the family not chaos but the subtle, beautiful absurdity of life. They laughed softly, sometimes through tears, learning that moments could be both sorrowful and comforting, both bittersweet and safe, and as the night deepened, the glow of the channels became a lullaby. Each frame, each small act of gentle absurdity, sang quietly to the family. You belong here, even in the strange, even in the messy, even when the world feels infinite and confusing. Morty, already halfway to sleep, murmured, I love this. I love seeing all the in-between." Rick didn't answer, only let the channels continue. Summer leaned against Beth. Jerry's hand brushed lightly over his knee, and the garage became a sanctuary of quiet reflection and shared warmth. The night outside deepened further, and the soft hum of the channels filled the corners of the house. Laughter, gentle as a breeze, mixed with the quiet sighs of understanding. And in that small, luminescent room, the Smith family sat together. Their hearts lightened in ways words could never fully express. The glow from the invention had softened further, like the last traces of twilight dissolving into night. The garage, usually a place of disorder and clattering tools, now held a strange serenity. Shadows draped themselves across the walls, gentle and unthreatening, and the hum of the device resonated like a heartbeat in the quiet. Rick sat back in his chair, one hand resting lightly on the remote. His usual sardonic edge was absent. Instead, he seemed absorbed in the flickering images, a soft, almost imperceptible warmth in his eyes. The scenes on the screen were absurd, as always, but there was something different tonight. They carried not the sharpness of chaos, but the weight of memory, a bittersweet thread weaving humor with reflection. Morty, leaning against Beth, watched him quietly. He had learned over these past nights that Rick could be unpredictable, even unknowable, but moments like these revealed something more tender. Morty felt the urge to ask a question, but the words seemed unnecessary. He simply allowed himself to observe, absorbing the rare calm that had settled over his grandfather. One of the channels showed a small floating city, its buildings crooked but charming, inhabited by creatures laughing at entirely inexplicable games. Another channel displayed a man meticulously stacking teacups, only to watch them collapse again, smiling at the repeated failure. Rick's gaze softened at each scene, the corners of his mouth lifting in a quiet, private smile. Funny, isn't it? Rick murmured, almost to himself. All this? Nonsense, and yet it reminds me of things I forgot to care about. Morty tilted his head, eyes heavy with sleep. Like what? Rick didn't answer directly. He leaned back, eyes flicking to the ceiling, the faint hum of the machine echoing in his chest. Like when things weren't so complicated, when you could make someone laugh and feel like you'd done something right, when the mess didn't matter as much as the moment. Beth and Summer watched silently, understanding more than the words conveyed. They had seen Rick in countless forms, brilliant, reckless, dismissive, but never quite like this. Tonight his inventions weren't weapons, weren't experiments. They were mirrors showing fragments of life that were absurd, fleeting and quietly beautiful. Jerry, surprisingly, was smiling softly at a small screen showing a dog chasing its own tail while balancing a teacup on its back. Rick's voice, low and reflective, continued over the gentle flicker. I built a lot of stuff to change the universe, or at least to prove I could, but sometimes the simplest things make the biggest difference. Morty's eyelids drooped further, comforted not only by the warm glow but by the subtle transformation he observed in Rick. I think I get it, he whispered. It's not just about chaos. It's about noticing the little bits, the moments that don't explode or break anything. That's what matters. Rick nodded slightly, though Morty couldn't tell if it was agreement or a rare moment of acknowledgement. His fingers idly traced the surface of the remote as he watched a channel showing a small girl sketching stars in her notebook, then smiling to herself at the imperfection of a crooked line. Yeah, exactly. You notice it, and for a second, everything's lighter. Everything that's heavy feels smaller. Summer's gaze softened, drawn to an image of a man juggling oranges while humming a lullaby, his concentration meticulous yet tender. She realized that understanding everything wasn't necessary to feel the quiet beauty in these fleeting moments. She simply leaned back, letting herself exist within the warmth of shared observation. Beth, ever perceptive, noticed the subtle change in Rick. The smirk he wore, so often a shield, had lost its sharpness. His eyes followed the screen with a strange reverence, as if the absurdity before him reminded him of fleeting joys he had once overlooked. She felt a tenderness for him, a recognition that beyond his brilliance and cynicism, there existed a capacity for soft reflection, a quiet nostalgia. Even Jerry, lost in the gentle absurdity of a channel showing a cat balancing a tiny hat while sipping tea, felt a touch of clarity. The night had become a space where they could all simply exist together without judgment, each finding their own small comfort in the flickering images. Morty's breathing slowed, rhythmic and even, but he murmured softly, half to himself, half to the world. It's nice, seeing him like this. Not yelling, not pretending, just seeing. Rick's gaze lingered on the screen, one hand resting lightly on the flask, the other brushing the edge of the device. The channels continued, drifting from one small absurdity to another. A man dancing in the rain with a hat too large for his head, a child building a tower of mismatched blocks only for it to tumble, laughter spilling from his lips without shame. Rick's smirk returned briefly, but it was different now, soft, private, filled with recognition rather than cynicism. Funny how the things you think don't matter found up mattering the most, Rick muttered, voice almost drowned by the hum of the device. Little joys, little failures, little connections. Morty felt warmth pooling in his chest, realizing that the laughter and sadness intertwined on the screen were teaching him something deeper. Empathy wasn't loud or heroic. It was quiet, almost invisible, residing in the delicate balance of humor and sorrow. He let the lesson wash over him, letting his mind stretch toward understanding without forcing it. The family leaned back in their chairs, shoulders relaxing, eyes tracing the soft glow. The garage, usually cluttered and chaotic, had become a haven. Rick's inventions had turned not into engines of destruction, but into windows, mirrors reflecting the subtle absurdity, the fragile beauty of existence, and the quiet nostalgia that could only come from observing without interference. Summer whispered, barely moving her lips, "It's like we're allowed to just watch and feel and not have to fix anything." Beth nodded, her fingers brushing lightly against Morty's arm. "Yeah, just be here, together, even in the weirdness." Jerry's smile lingered. "Even me?" he asked softly. "Especially you," Morty said, a small smile forming as his eyes drifted closed. Rick finally leaned back fully, flask set aside, a contented exhale escaping him. The channels continued, quiet and absurd, their rhythm now soothing like a heartbeat. It was a night of soft reflection, of laughter tinged with tears, of nostalgia and empathy intertwined. And in the glow, the Smith family sat together, strangely whole, quietly united, and wrapped in a fragile warmth that would linger long after the invention powered down. The garage, the invention, the absurd channels, they were no longer just tools or distractions. They were windows to wonder, mirrors to memory, and soft lullabies for hearts long hardened by life's chaos. And as Morty drifted fully towards sleep, Rick's quiet gaze followed, filled with recognition that even the maddest scientist could find tenderness in the smallest absurdities. The hum of the invention continued into the night, a lullaby of absurdity, nostalgia, and subtle reflection, carrying the family gently into a world where laughter and melancholy could coexist, soft and comforting, like the brush of a night breeze on weary skin. The glow from Rick's invention had softened to a gentle luminescence, bathing the garage in a serene twilight. Shadows lingered in corners, but were no longer intimidating. They wrapped around the family like a protective cloak. Morty sat quietly, shoulders slumping into the worn edge of a chair, his gaze caught in the flickering images dancing across the screen. Tonight, the channels felt different. The absurdity lingered, as always, but beneath it was a rhythm Morty hadn't noticed before. A pulse that spoke of lives beyond laughter, of experiences both strange and tender. Each scene was a small universe, a whisper of connection that tugged at something deep inside him. Rick leaned back, one hand idly resting on the remote. "Morty, you ever notice that the universe isn't just chaos or order?" he said softly, voice almost drowned by the hum of the machine. "Sometimes. It's the middle, the stuff in between, the little moments that make someone else's world a little lighter or heavier. You feel that?" Morty nodded, heavy-lidded, letting the words sink. The first channel appeared, a boy in a small crooked town balancing teacups on his head, while simultaneously trying to console a friend who had fallen. The effort was clumsy, imperfect, yet tender. Morty's chest ached slightly, not from sadness but from a strange, swelling warmth. He realized that kindness wasn't about perfection. It was about trying, about noticing someone else's heart and reaching out even awkwardly. Summer, sitting beside him, noticed his stillness. She didn't comment, simply leaned closer, feeling the calm settle over them both. For once she wasn't teasing, wasn't analyzing, she was just present. The channel shifted, and Morty's gaze followed a small floating creature, its body shimmering like molten glass, struggling to carry a fragile bundle across an endless, cloud-draped expanse. Its movements were hesitant, almost fearful, yet determined. Morty felt a pull of empathy, realizing that courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent persistence. Beth's eyes flickered to Morty, recognizing the subtle change. He had always been sensitive, but now there was a depth to his perception, a stretching of his heart toward understanding. He wasn't just observing the oddity or the humor. He was feeling it, letting it resonate in his chest, expanding into awareness of the worlds beyond their own. Jerry, surprisingly calm, watched a channel showing a small creature, attempting to compose music for an audience of glowing, floating orbs. The creature faltered, laughed at itself, then tried again. Jerry smiled faintly, understanding the small, persistent efforts mirrored his own quiet struggles in life. Morty noticed, seeing how empathy could ripple outward, touching everyone present even in the softest of moments. Rick's voice returned, low and reflective. Morty, empathy's like stretching a rubber band. You pull it gently at first, then a little more. The more you practice, the further you can reach without snapping. You feel someone else's weight without losing your own balance. That's what these channels are for, practice. Morty's eyes softened as he leaned forward slightly. I think I get it, Rick. It's not just watching funny stuff or weird stuff. It's noticing how others feel. Laughing, feeling, even when it's hard or strange. That makes you better at caring. Rick nodded, eyes fixed on a screen showing two creatures sitting side by side in a quiet field, their hands touching occasionally as they built a fragile tower of stones. The tower wobbled, toppled, then was rebuilt. The creatures laughed softly, not at each other but with each other. Morty's chest warmed further. That laughter, that patience, that shared experience, he realized it mirrored the subtle lessons of life. To notice, to reach out, to persist. Summer shifted slightly, resting her chin on her folded arms. I get it too, she said quietly. You don't have to fix anything, just be present, watch, feel, care, that's enough sometimes. Beth smiled softly at her daughter, then glanced at Morty. She recognized that this stretch of empathy wasn't a single act. It was a cumulative effect, a growing awareness shaped by gentle exposure to the absurd, the melancholic and the tender. Each moment in the channels was a lesson in noticing, understanding and accepting the world's contradictions without judgment. Morty leaned back against Beth's arm, eyelids heavy but mind alert. The next channel showed a child sketching tiny, imperfect stars across a dark canvas, each line trembling yet intentional. Morty felt a quiet ache of recognition, understanding that beauty often lay in the imperfection, that care often arrived through small, faltering gestures. The creatures on the screen weren't heroic. They didn't save the world. But they stretched themselves gently, patiently toward understanding others. And that, Morty realized, was the true quiet heroism. Rick, sipping slowly from his flask, watched the family's reactions. The corners of his mouth lifted in the faintest of smiles. His inventions, often intended to demonstrate cleverness or power, had transformed tonight into mirrors, showing them not chaos, but empathy, humor, and tender absurdity interwoven. He could see Morty's heart stretching, Summer's curiosity softening, Beth's reflective gaze deepening, and even Jerry's quiet comfort settling in. The channels drifted onward, each segment carrying a rhythm of gentle discovery. A small creature learned to balance on a narrow ledge while comforting another. A family of odd beings built a fragile bridge together. A solitary figure sang a tune that echoed across a dreamlike landscape. Morty's laughter came softly, mingling with quiet sighs and the occasional tear of recognition. Empathy was becoming tangible, a stretching of the soul, a quiet expansion of his understanding beyond his own little world. Morty's voice, barely above a whisper, spoke to Rick. I think I understand now. It's not just funny or weird or sad. It's everything together. Laughing, caring, noticing. It's all part of the same thing. Rick's eyes softened and he nodded. Exactly, Morty. That's what I wanted you to see. Life's not about the extremes. It's about feeling the in-between. The stuff that whispers to you in quiet moments. The stuff that makes hearts bigger without you even noticing. The family sank further into the gentle glow, shoulders and thoughts relaxing. Morty's small smile lingered, eyes half closed as the scenes continued to drift by. He felt stretched but not uncomfortably so. His empathy had grown quietly, like a river carving a gentle path through rock. Summer rested her head lightly on her folded arms. Beth's hand brushed against Morty's shoulder, and Jerry's quiet presence became a thread of unity woven through the night. The night deepened further, the glow of the channels softening into a lullaby of light and reflection. Morty's breathing slowed rhythmic and even, and he murmured softly, "It's nice, this feeling, noticing." His words trailed into dreams, carried gently on the hum of the invention. A tender echo of empathy learned in silence, and Rick, still watching, allowed the channels to drift, each frame a lesson in patience, humor, and quiet kindness. The garage, once cluttered and chaotic, had transformed into a sanctuary, a place where hearts could stretch, soften, and understand without force or expectation. Laughter and quiet tears mingled, Shared warmth enveloped the family, and the night carried them gently toward a new understanding. That true heroism was often silent, subtle and infinitely patient. The glow continued, bathing the family in warmth, absurdity, and gentle understanding. And as Morty drifted fully into sleep, Rick's quiet smile lingered, reflecting a rare pride he had shown them. Without words or lectures, the quiet strength of empathy, and the beauty of noticing the in-between. The soft glow of Rick's invention lingered like a fading dream, casting gentle shadows across the garage. The usual clutter of tools and gadgets seemed almost reverent tonight, as if it too understood the quiet transformation happening within the family. Summer leaned back in her chair, her gaze caught by the flickering images that danced across the screens. Images absurd, surreal and quietly tender, unlike Morty, who had already begun to feel the gentle stretch of empathy. Summer's wonder was curious but cautious. She had always approached the world with sharp edges, a shield forged from experience and observation. But tonight the edges seemed unnecessary, like armor left at the door. The absurdity on the screens wasn't threatening. It didn't demand action or judgment. It simply existed, and Summer felt herself softening in response. The first channel she noticed showed a creature shaped like a patchwork cloud, wobbling on spindly legs, attempting to reach a floating lantern. Each time it stumbled, it looked back, its eyes wide but trusting, and then tried again. Summer's chest tightened slightly, not with worry but with a quiet awe. She realized the creature's determination was fragile yet resilient, and in that small, odd moment, she felt a gentle tug toward empathy. Beth watched her daughter quietly, recognizing the subtle shift. "You don't have to understand it all," she murmured softly. "Just feel it. That's enough." Summer nodded almost imperceptibly, eyes fixed on the screen. She saw not just the creature's struggle, but its courage, its willingness to keep trying despite absurd odds. And she felt something stirring inside her, a soft curiosity that didn't need explanation. She didn't have to solve the puzzle, analyze the problem, or control the chaos. She could simply exist alongside it, witnessing the beauty of persistence, imperfection, and quiet bravery. A new channel flickered on, showing a tiny world where floating beings painted colors across the sky, each stroke slightly off from the last, yet blending into a kaleidoscope of unexpected harmony. Summer felt her lips curve into a small, private smile. It wasn't perfection that mattered here. It was presence, attention, and care. Even in a world of absurdity, intention could create warmth, and that warmth could ripple outward. Morty, half asleep beside her, murmured, "It's nice, isn't it?" Summer's gaze softened further, and she realized he had already begun to absorb the subtle lessons that the channels offered. That empathy, patience, and understanding often emerged quietly, like a tide lapping gently against the shore of the heart. Rick sat nearby, flask in hand, observing the family without interruption. The faint smirk that usually hid his feelings was replaced by a reflective calm. The invention hummed softly, a gentle lullaby of light and sound. He had built this device countless times for exploration, for amusement, for chaos, but tonight it served a different purpose. It cradled the family in a shared experience of wonder, absurdity, and tender reflection. Beth leaned back, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "See, Summer? You don't need to be sharp or quick or perfect. Just be here. That's more than enough." Summer let the words sink in, feeling their quiet truth. She had spent much of her life defending herself with wit, sarcasm, and control. But tonight, in the gentle glow of absurd universes, she discovered a different strength. The ability to observe, to feel, to exist without pretense. The next channel depicted a small creature sitting beside a glowing river, listening to the sound of its own reflection, echoing softly back. Summer's eyes widened slightly. The creature seemed lonely yet content, its attention fully present in the moment. Summer understood without words that wonder wasn't just about excitement or curiosity. It was about noticing, honoring, and respecting the quiet lives around you. Even the most peculiar or vulnerable beings deserved attention and empathy. Morty's voice broke the silence, soft and reverent. "It's like we're all a little like them, huh?" Summer glanced at him, seeing the same gentle insight reflected in his half-closed eyes. "Yeah," she whispered, a warmth spreading across her chest. "I guess we are." Jerry, surprisingly, had found a channel showing a clumsy being attempting to juggle glowing orbs. It faltered, toppled, and tried again. A soft smile spread across his face. Summer noticed and felt her heart lift slightly, realizing that even Jerry's quiet comfort contributed to the family's shared sense of wonder. The room, once fractured and tense, now vibrated with small, fragile threads of unity. The screens shifted again, showing a scene of tiny patchwork beings weaving a tapestry of light across a starry sky. Summer's gaze lingered on the intricate patterns, noticing the subtle imperfections that made the design more beautiful than flawless symmetry could ever achieve. She realized that the quiet moments, the failures, the tentative attempts, all of it held value. Empathy was not about fixing or judging. It was about recognizing and appreciating the effort, the courage, and the shared experience. Beth's hand brushed lightly against Summer's arm, grounding her in the soft reality of presence. "You see it, don't you?" she whispered. "The beauty is in noticing, in feeling, in being here. That's what matters." Summer nodded, feeling a serene clarity. The world didn't require her to be clever or critical or in control. It only asked her to observe, care, and allow herself to wonder. Rick's gaze swept over the family once more, his eyes lingering on Summer. He had spent years demonstrating brilliance, recklessness, and audacity, but tonight he witnessed something more profound. Summer, who often wielded her sharpness like armor, was quietly opening herself to the rhythm of life's gentle absurdities. She was learning to be present, to feel, and to recognize the small, meaningful gestures scattered across infinite universes. Morty's breathing slowed, a rhythm matching the soft hum of the invention. Summer allowed herself to relax fully into the moment, her shoulders releasing tension she hadn't realized she'd carried. She felt lighter, softer, connected, not just to the creatures on the screen, but to her family, to the shared quiet wonder that filled the room. The garage, once a chaotic space of noise and clutter, had become a sanctuary. Shadows and light danced gently, cradling the family in warmth. Each channel, absurd yet tender, acted as a lesson in subtlety, empathy, and presence. Summer felt her curiosity stretch outward, embracing the quiet beauty in the imperfections and absurdities around her. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I think I understand. You don't have to get it all, just feel it." Beth smiled. Morty's half-sleeping form stirred slightly in agreement, and even Jerry nodded, quietly present. Rick, watching with a rare softness, let the channels drift, humming along in subtle accompaniment to the family's shared reflection. Summer's gaze lingered on a final screen, showing a small being floating peacefully among clouds. Its movements slow, deliberate, and entirely at ease. She felt her chest expand with a gentle wonder, a quiet joy in simply witnessing life's tender absurdities. She realized that her presence mattered, that observing and feeling were powerful acts in their own right. As the night deepened, the glow from the invention softened to a gentle shimmer, casting a lullaby of light across the garage. Summer, Morty, Beth, and even Jerry settled further into the quiet, absorbing the lessons whispered by absurdity, humor, and tender reflection. The room breathed with warmth, connection, and the soft exhale of wonder, and as Summer's eyelids grew heavy, her last thought lingered like a song drifting on the night breeze. That curiosity and empathy, gentle presence and quiet understanding, could stretch hearts wider than any chaos or absurdity ever could. The hum of Rick's invention carried them gently towards sleep, a soft cradle of absurdity, tenderness, and reflective peace, leaving Summer and the family wrapped in warmth and quiet wonder. The gentle glow from Rick's invention spilled softly across the garage, painting everything it touched in shades of twilight blue and muted gold. Jerry sat slightly apart from the others, a cushion under his arms, observing the flickering images on the screen. Usually he felt awkward in these family moments, his presence a small uncomfortable echo in the laughter and chaos. But tonight the air was different, light, patient, forgiving. The absurd universes on the screen seemed to embrace him, quietly welcoming him into their rhythm. A channel flickered into view, a small, clumsy creature, attempting to juggle glowing spheres that hovered just out of reach. Each tumble of a sphere sent a soft chiming sound into the air, like a delicate bell. The creature paused, looked at its audience, an array of floating, luminous orbs, and attempted again. Jerry's lips curved into a small smile. The effort wasn't perfect, but it was earnest. It reminded him that trying, even clumsily, had its own quiet dignity. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing with gentle focus. For once he didn't feel excluded or irrelevant. Instead, he felt a subtle alignment with the screen, as though the creature's persistence mirrored his own small, ongoing struggles. He had always been aware of his flaws, the failed jokes, the clumsy decisions, the sense of being less than others. But here, he found solace. Even foolishness had a place. Even imperfection mattered. Morty, half asleep beside him, noticed the faint change in his father. "It's nice, Dad," Morty whispered. Jerry turned slightly, surprise softening into a quiet warmth. He hadn't expected acknowledgement, especially not from Morty, who often seemed caught between worlds of curiosity and exhaustion. But the words carried a gentle validation, a bridge built with nothing more than recognition. The next channel showed a tiny being carefully arranging pebbles in a pattern along a winding path. It faltered, knocked a pebble over and then paused. Rather than frustration, it simply adjusted, recentered and tried again. Jerry's chest lifted slightly. He recognized himself in that careful, imperfect persistence. Life often felt like a jumbled path of small mistakes, but this creature reminded him that patience and self-compassion could guide him forward. Summer, watching nearby, leaned forward with her usual curiosity, but spoke softly. "See, Jerry? It's not about being perfect. It's about being here, trying and noticing. That's what matters." Jerry nodded, feeling the words settle like a soft cloak around his shoulders. For once, he didn't feel inadequate. He felt seen not just by Summer, but by the universe itself. As if the channels were whispering that even the quietest, most fumbling efforts had value. Rick, standing back with a flask in hand, observed Jerry's small shift. He had spent years pushing Morty, Summer, and even himself to extremes, adventures, chaos, brilliance. But tonight he had done something different. The invention wasn't showing universes to conquer or puzzles to solve. It was showing moments of quiet beauty, small gestures of perseverance and connection. Rick saw Jerry soften, letting himself exist in the gentle rhythm of observation, and he allowed a rare, almost imperceptible smile. Beth's hand rested lightly on Jerry's arm, grounding him in the warmth of family. "It's okay to belong, Jerry," she whispered. "Even here, even now, you're allowed to feel it." He felt a gentle pulse of gratitude. The weight of self-doubt and insecurity lifted slightly, replaced with a fragile but undeniable sense of inclusion. Tonight he was part of something larger, even if silently. The screens continued to drift, each scene a soft reminder of perseverance, humor, and tender absurdity. One channel showed a family of floating creatures building a tower of blocks together. Each attempt wobbled. Some blocks fell, yet they persisted, laughing softly with one another. Jerry's gaze lingered, a warmth spreading through his chest. He understood the quiet lesson. Belonging wasn't always declared. Sometimes it was absorbed in shared effort, in the gentle hum of presence, in the acknowledgement of each other's attempts. Morty, noticing his father's rare attentiveness, murmured again, I get it, Dad. You're part of it too." Jerry nodded, almost imperceptibly, letting the words settle. There was no need for applause or recognition. The channels, the gentle glow, the quiet energy of the family, they provided enough affirmation. He was included simply by witnessing, by being present, by allowing himself to absorb the subtle lessons of care, persistence, and observation. Summer, lying back in her chair, watched the soft movements of the creatures, feeling the shared rhythm of the family. She realized that belonging didn't demand brilliance or perfection. It only demanded attention and presence, small acts of noticing and empathy. She glanced at Jerry, noting the rare serenity on his face. The humor and absurdity of the channels were softened tonight, almost like lullabies in motion, and they seemed to cradle him gently. Beth whispered again, "Even the smallest efforts matter. Even the quietest presence is enough." Jerry felt the truth in her words, a warmth growing in his chest. He realized that belonging wasn't a loud declaration or a dramatic event. It was a soft recognition, a series of small connections that accumulated quietly. Each chuckle, each soft glance, each shared moment of observation formed threads weaving him into the fabric of the family. The next scene shifted, showing a lone creature standing under a glowing tree, humming softly to itself while watching the stars. Its melody was imperfect, but it resonated with patience and care. Jerry leaned back slightly, closing his eyes for a moment. He understood that even the smallest voices, even the simplest contributions could ripple outward. Empathy, effort, and presence created subtle bonds that transcended words and accolades. Morty's eyelids drooped, the hum of the invention lulling him toward sleep. Summer's soft wonder had settled into a gentle serenity, and Jerry, for once fully attuned to the quiet rhythm of the night, felt a fleeting but profound sense of belonging. It wasn't permanent, not yet. It was fragile, almost ephemeral, but it existed, and that was enough. Rick, watching silently, allowed the channels to drift, each frame a lesson in patience, empathy, and gentle absurdity. He had given them no grand adventure, no explosive spectacle, no immediate triumph, but he had given them something rare, a mirror to their own hearts, showing the value of simple presence, quiet effort, and fragile unity. The garage was filled with the soft, shared hum of light, the quiet breaths of a family learning, slowly, to be present with one another. Jerry's smile, small and almost shy, lingered. He was part of the rhythm now, even if only for a fleeting moment. And it felt like home. As the night deepened, the channels softened to a gentle glow, each absurd, tender, and quietly meaningful image whispering lessons of belonging. Jerry, wrapped in the warmth of gentle recognition, felt his chest expand just slightly, enough to carry a subtle, fragile pride. For once he had found a place within the family, and he allowed himself to breathe it in fully. And in the quiet hum of Rick's invention, the soft glow bathing the garage, the faint laughter mingling with sighs of understanding, Jerry drifted into a light, peaceful sleep, cradled by the gentle knowledge that he belonged, even if only in whispers, shared smiles, and tender, fleeting moments of understanding. The soft glow from Rick's invention continued to bathe the garage in muted twilight colors. Shadows flickered across the walls like quiet memories, and the hum of the device resonated softly, almost like a lullaby. Beth sat slightly forward, her elbows resting on her knees, her eyes fixed on the screen. The absurdity of the channel still danced before her, creatures juggling stars, landscapes bending like soft clay. But tonight, she saw something different. Tonight, the chaos carried reflection, a gentle mirror of her own inner life. A channel flickered to life, showing a version of herself, not exactly the Beth she knew, yet familiar in every essential way. This alternate self moved through the world with small, careful decisions, navigating absurd situations with patience rather than panic. The figure paused frequently, hesitated, laughed softly at the ridiculousness surrounding her, and carried on. Beth's chest tightened slightly, not from worry but from recognition. Here was a Beth who embodied choices she had not made, yet whose path felt oddly comforting, an echo of her own resilience and humanity. She realized that the screen wasn't offering judgment or critique, it offered presence. She watched as her reflection, imperfect, tender, endlessly human, stumbled and recovered, learning to navigate a world simultaneously absurd and meaningful. Beth understood, without needing to speak, that her own life, her choices, her moments of quiet courage were all valid. There was no need for perfection, no need to fix every mistake. The channel whispered a gentle truth: growth and care were enough. Summer beside her leaned forward, watching quietly. Morty's eyelids drooped, lulled by the soft hum of the invention. Jerry, settled into his fleeting sense of belonging, let his attention drift lazily across the shifting images. Beth, however, felt anchored, suspended in reflection. She saw her past and potential selves mingling on the screen, branching like rivers toward countless possibilities, each choice tenderly shaping the person she was becoming. Rick, flask in hand, observed Beth silently. He had spent years building devices and dimensions, constructing chaos and marvel, yet the quiet moment before him was one of his most profound achievements. The invention, usually a tool of disruption, had become a lens of understanding, offering insight into the quiet threads of connection and reflection that bound the family together. Rick's eyes softened, and for a fleeting instant, he allowed himself to feel satisfaction. Not pride exactly, but a reverent acknowledgement of the value of stillness, presence, and empathy. Beth's gaze lingered on a particular frame, her alternate self gently tending to a tiny, glowing creature that seemed lost in its own absurd world. The creature stumbled, struggled, yet was met with patience and care rather than frustration. Beth felt warmth spreading in her chest. She understood now that nurturing, both of herself and of others, was an act of courage. She had often sought perfection in her role, in her choices, in her family. But this simple act of attention and compassion resonated more than any grand gesture could. A faint smile curved her lips as another channel appeared, showing a miniature universe where tiny beings created bridges of light over turbulent rivers. Each bridge wobbled, some beams fell, yet the builders laughed softly, encouraged each other, and tried again. Beth's thoughts drifted gently. Even when life felt chaotic or unsteady, connection and care mattered. Even the smallest gestures had weight. Even imperfection carried beauty. Summer leaned closer and whispered, "It's peaceful, isn't it?" Beth nodded, absorbing the words as if they were a soft melody. She realized that understanding wasn't required. Feeling was enough. She could witness the beauty, the effort, the tender absurdities, and let them ripple through her heart. And in that moment, she felt deeply aligned with her family, their laughter, their struggle, their quiet reflections, all echoing softly in the glow of the screens. The next channel showed her alternate self facing a puzzle impossible to solve perfectly, a wall of shifting blocks and floating lights. She hesitated, sighed softly, and then approached the task gently, adjusting as she went. Beth felt tears threaten, not from sadness but from recognition. She had spent much of her life rushing, judging, striving for answers that didn't exist. Yet here, in this quiet, absurd reflection, she witnessed patience, grace, and acceptance. She understood that gentleness toward herself, toward life, was the truest strength. Rick's gaze drifted across the family, lingering on Beth. The hum of the invention filled the room, a soft backdrop to the shared quiet. No words were necessary. The lesson of the channels, the lesson of reflection, was becoming clear to all. There was beauty in imperfection, courage in stillness, and connection in empathy. Rick allowed himself a small, almost invisible exhale, acknowledging that tonight he had offered something more lasting than adventure: insight, tenderness, and presence. Beth leaned back slightly. Her eyes softened. She watched as the alternate self paused, looking at a floating constellation of stars that shimmered like tiny lanterns. Each choice, each movement was delicate and deliberate, as if life itself could be held gently without fear of collapse. Beth realized that her own life, filled with decisions, responsibilities, and occasional missteps, could be approached in the same spirit. She could move forward with care and attention, embracing both the absurdity and the tenderness of existence. Morty's soft breathing mingled with the gentle hum, and Summer's gaze lingered, curious and thoughtful. Jerry, occasionally glancing at the screens, felt a quiet sense of comfort, observing his family's shared reflection. The garage, filled with muted light and subtle shadows, became a sanctuary, a place where each member of the family could witness themselves, one another, and the soft lessons of care and presence that the invention offered. Beth's attention returned to her alternate self, who gently cradled a small glowing fragment of light, carefully placing it on a delicate pedestal. The act was unhurried, tender, and meaningful in its simplicity. Beth understood that life's value often resided in such small gestures, noticing, nurturing, and participating with care, even in worlds that seemed absurd or chaotic. The act of presence itself became sacred, a quiet assertion that her attention and care mattered. Summer whispered again, "Even in the weirdest worlds, there's still something gentle, something ours." Beth smiled faintly, feeling the truth in the words. Her alternate self on the screen mirrored her own realization. Life was a series of choices, often imperfect, but guided by attention, care, and empathy. Each step, no matter how small or absurd, carried meaning. As the night deepened, the glow of the invention softened into a gentle shimmer, illuminating the family in muted blues and soft golds. Beth, breathing slowly, felt a calm resolve settle within her. The channels, absurd and tender, had offered her more than reflection. They had offered understanding, connection, and the reassurance that the choices she made, the love she nurtured, and the care she offered mattered deeply. Rick watched silently, the hum of the device harmonizing with the quiet breaths of the family. Each channel faded gently into the next, a tapestry of absurdity, tenderness, and reflective wisdom. Beth allowed herself to sink into the warmth, her gaze softening further as she absorbed the quiet lessons of the night, and as the glow dimmed to a subtle lullaby of light, Beth whispered softly to herself, "It's okay to be human. It's okay to care. It's okay to notice." The garage, the family, the invention, all seemed to exhale with her words, wrapping her in a gentle embrace of understanding. Presence and quiet love, the soft hum lingered, a reminder that even in absurdity there was reflection, even in chaos there was tenderness, and even in fleeting moments there was a sense of belonging. Beth's heart expanded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that she was part of this shared experience, part of the subtle rhythm of care, observation, and love. And with that, she settled back, her eyes heavy, yet her spirit light. The glow of the screens became a cradle of soft understanding, guiding her toward dreams where she could rest, reflect, and continue to learn the quiet power of presence and empathy. The soft hum of Rick's invention filled the garage, a gentle pulse in the stillness of night. The light spilled across the room in muted twilight hues, brushing faces with a calm, almost reverent glow. Channels continued to shift, each one a small fragment of surreal comedy, strange creatures dancing with impossible instruments, landscapes folding into themselves, and odd little narratives that made no logical sense. Yet for once the family did not recoil at chaos. They settled into it, letting the absurdity wash over them like a quiet stream. Morty blinked slowly, feeling a subtle wonder settle in his chest. He watched as a tiny figure on the screen juggled floating moons, each wobbling with a soft musical hum. Every time a moon fell, it produced a delicate bell-like tone. Instead of frustration, the character giggled gently, adjusting its rhythm and continuing with the same tender focus. Morty couldn't help but smile, a small soft laugh slipping past his lips. It wasn't loud or brash, but delicate, like the sound of chimes in a quiet garden at midnight. Summer leaned forward, her curiosity piqued, but her face remained calm, her expression softened by the warm glow. "It's funny," she whispered, but there was no edge in her voice. It was a gentle acknowledgement of the absurdity, a recognition that humor could coexist with reflection and tenderness. She noticed Jerry chuckling softly beside her, the faint smile of someone who had found his place, however small, in the gentle rhythm of shared observation. Beth's gaze remained steady on the screen. The channels carried no lessons or explicit morals. They offered only the quiet absurdity of existence. Tiny beings wearing mismatched hats danced across undulating fields. Birds sang in mathematical sequences that made no sense, and houses grew legs and wandered aimlessly. Yet despite the ridiculousness, there was no panic, no chaos that threatened to overwhelm. The scenes were odd, whimsical, but soothing. Absurdity had been transformed into a tender, meditative lullaby. Rick, leaning casually against the workbench, observed the family with a faint, reflective smile. The invention had been designed for interdimensional exploration, a chaotic tool to peer into infinite worlds, yet tonight it functioned as a mirror of the subtle truths of life. He watched Morty's soft amusement, Summer's attentive curiosity, Jerry's rare serenity, and Beth's reflective calm, and allowed himself a small sense of satisfaction. For once he had given them nothing to fear, nothing to escape, only quiet wonder. Another channel appeared, showing creatures building towers of colorful blocks that shifted and wobbled like jelly. They toppled, they tumbled, they laughed quietly at their own mistakes and then rebuilt with the same delicate patience. Morty leaned back, eyes half closed, absorbing the rhythm of their movements. He understood now that comedy didn't always require loud laughter or explosive moments. Sometimes it could be gentle, soft, almost imperceptible, but profoundly moving in its quiet honesty. Jerry, watching the same channel, chuckled again, the sound light and unforced. He felt the absurdity resonate with him, reminding him of his own small attempts in life, the little mistakes and fumbling efforts that often went unnoticed. And yet here, in this shared moment, the laughter felt validating, comforting. Even in imperfection, even in foolishness, there was value, there was presence, there was belonging. Summer leaned forward again, whispering to Beth, "It's like... everything's a little bit wrong, but it's okay. And somehow." "That's beautiful," Beth nodded, a soft smile forming. She realized that life's absurdities, Its impossible expectations and unpredictable turns could coexist with tenderness and love. The channels, though silly, carried deeper truths, reminders that the world could be chaotic yet gentle, nonsensical yet meaningful. Morty's thoughts drifted as he watched a tiny orchestra of floating beings, each playing instruments made from clouds and starlight. The music was slightly off-key, yet harmonious in its imperfection. He felt a soft warmth spread through him. Laughter could coexist with reflection. Humor could carry wisdom. Even absurdity could nurture empathy, attention, and care. Morty understood in a subtle, almost unconscious way that his own small quirks and efforts, however awkward, were part of the same tender rhythm. Rick's gaze shifted between the channels and the family. He noted Beth's reflective calm, Summer's curious attentiveness, Jerry's soft acceptance, and Morty's emerging insight. He realized that tonight's comedy was not meant to entertain in the usual sense, but to teach quietly, subtly. Absurdity became a lullaby, a meditation on imperfection, connection, and presence. He allowed himself a rare exhale of contentment, observing that the invention had succeeded in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. The channels continued to drift, each scene a vignette of whimsical, gentle absurdity. Tiny creatures painted invisible canvases, clouds shifted to form impossible landscapes, and stars pirouetted across alien skies in deliberate, slow arcs. Beth allowed herself a faint laugh, the sound blending with the soft hum of the invention. She felt the comedy soften her worries, unraveling tension with gentle, absurd humor. Life, she realized, didn't have to make perfect sense to carry beauty and meaning. Summer, lying back in her chair, felt the night's quiet rhythm settle over her. She recognized that being present, witnessing the small absurdities of life and family, carried its own subtle reward. Laughter could be shared without noise. Humor could coexist with reflection, and joy could arise in the most unexpected, gentle ways. She glanced at Jerry, who smiled faintly at a screen where a tiny being balanced a floating teacup atop its head while walking a wobbling tightrope. For once, Jerry felt included in the cosmic joke, a small but meaningful participant in the quiet comedy of life. Morty's eyes began to droop as he watched a tiny pair of creatures exchange gifts of glowing light, each offering something absurd yet sincere. The laughter that rose from the scene was delicate, chiming softly in the quiet garage. Morty understood that humor wasn't just amusement. It was connection, empathy, and shared experience. And as his eyelids grew heavier, he felt a soft certainty that the night, the invention, and the family's shared presence were all part of a larger, tender rhythm. The hum of the device and the glow of the channels became a gentle pulse, synchronizing with the family's breathing. Rick, observing silently, felt the quiet weight of his own care settle into the room. Tonight, he hadn't created chaos or disruption. He had created a sanctuary, a space where absurdity became gentle, humor became reflective, and laughter became a lullaby. The family, each member absorbed in the soft rhythm of the screens, allowed themselves to exist fully in the moment. Jerry's soft chuckle blended with Beth's gentle laugh, Summer's whispered observation, and Morty's near-silent awe. The comedy on the screens no longer felt alien or overwhelming. It felt like an embrace, a reminder that even in the most improbable worlds there was warmth, understanding, and care. Rick let the images drift, allowing the family to absorb the lesson that humor and absurdity could soothe, rather than startle, and that even the smallest gestures, the quietest laughs, carried meaning. As the night deepened, the channels faded into a gentle twilight of light and shadow. The figures on the screens slowed their movements, the laughter softened into delicate chimes, and the garage felt wrapped in a cocoon of serenity. Morty's eyes finally closed. Summer leaned back in contentment, Jerry exhaled softly, and Beth allowed herself to rest in reflection. Even Rick, usually restless and searching, found a rare pause, a moment of stillness in the quiet absurdity, and as the glow dimmed, leaving only the soft hum of the invention, the family understood in their own gentle ways that absurdity, humor, and tenderness were not opposites. They were intertwined. The comedy of the universe could cradle them, teach them, and soothe them. In that quiet space, laughter and reflection coexisted, leaving hearts lighter, spirits calmer, and minds prepared to drift into gentle dreams. The hum of Rick's invention softened, fading into the quiet rhythm of the garage. The glow of the screens dimmed slightly, leaving the room bathed in gentle shadows and muted light, like the aftermath of a day slowly giving way to night. The family, immersed in the strange and tender images, felt the shift, a lull between channels, a space that carried its own presence. It was not silence that pressed, but stillness, filled with expectation and reflection, a moment to breathe and simply be. Morty's eyelids fluttered, heavy with the weight of dreams pressing at the edges of his consciousness. The absurdity of the channels, the floating moons, dancing creatures, and impossible landscapes had softened into a gentle rhythm, guiding him toward calm. He exhaled slowly, a quiet acknowledgement of the space between stories. In that pause he felt a curious serenity, as if the universe itself had paused to watch him watch it. Beth, seated on the edge of a chair, noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere. The flashing images had ceased, leaving only the soft glow of the invention and the faint, almost musical hum it produced. She realized that this moment, the pause, was more than empty time. It was a chance to breathe, to reflect, to feel the quiet warmth of the family gathered around her. For once there was no expectation, no judgment, just presence, mutual and gentle, unspoken but deeply understood. Summer leaned back slightly, her eyes tracing the fading lights. The absurdity of the channels had settled into memory, leaving her with a soft sense of awe. She recognized the value in stillness, the comfort in shared quiet. Even Jerry, who usually sought reassurance through noise or conversation, exhaled gently, allowing himself to exist fully in the pause. The garage, usually a room of movement, laughter and occasional chaos, had become a sanctuary, a space where moments stretched quietly between events, where reflection could breathe. Rick stood slightly apart, flask in hand, observing the family in their shared stillness. He allowed himself a rare, unobtrusive smile. His invention, so often a tool of chaos and exploration, now served a gentler purpose. It had offered glimpses into other worlds, laughter mingled with sadness, and yet this pause, the silence between channels, was perhaps the most profound lesson of all. Sometimes, Rick thought, the world does not demand constant action. It demands attention, observation, and the willingness to simply be. The pause carried its own rhythm. It was measured in the soft rise and fall of breath, in the faint shifting of limbs against chairs and floorboards, in the gentle glow of light tracing familiar contours. Morty shifted slightly, nestling deeper into the corner where he sat, feeling the warmth of the family near him. The pause was not empty. It was full of unspoken connection, of trust, of the quiet acknowledgement that each member of the family existed in this space together. Beth's gaze wandered to the faintly glowing device. She had seen alternate selves, glimpsed reflections of her choices and possibilities, and yet it was this quiet moment, the pause, that lingered most in her mind. Here was a space for reflection, for understanding that life's most tender lessons often arrived not through action, but through attentive presence. She felt her chest soften, a warmth spreading through her, a quiet gratitude for being part of this family, of this strange, tender night. Summer's soft whisper broke the stillness, though it was hardly intrusive. "It's kind of nice, isn't it? Just this." Her words, minimal and gentle, captured the essence of the moment. They needed nothing more. No explanation, no response. The pause itself was enough. Morty nodded slightly, his soft exhale accompanying her statement, and Jerry smiled faintly, a smile that had been rare and fragile but now felt steady. Shared across the quiet hum of the room, Rick shifted his gaze to the ceiling, where the faint moonlight filtered through the garage window, painting delicate silver patterns across the floor. He allowed himself to feel the weight of the night, the soft, subtle rhythm of his family breathing together. There was no need for invention, for chaos, for adventure in this moment. The pause itself, the shared, suspended quiet, was enough. It carried lessons unspoken, patience, attention, empathy, and the gentle power of being present. The channels had faded, but the echoes of laughter and absurdity lingered softly in memory. Morty remembered the floating moons, the tiny creatures, the improbable orchestras of cloud instruments, and the gentle humor mingled with quiet reflection. These images settled like a soft layer in his mind, comforting and tender, and in the pause he felt the subtle lesson. Even when the world is chaotic or absurd, Moments of stillness provide space for understanding, connection and growth. Beth exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders drop in a rare gesture of release. The pause between channels felt almost sacred, a small sanctuary within the larger night. She allowed herself to reflect on her own choices, on her family, on the quiet act of being present. The invention had offered glimpses of other lives, but it was this stillness, this attentive silence, that anchored her to herself, to the family and to the fragile, beautiful rhythm of life unfolding. Summer leaned closer to Morty, her voice barely a whisper. "Even when it's all strange, it's okay to just be." Morty nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate in the soft pulse of the garage. In that moment he understood the subtle power of pause. It allowed space for empathy, for reflection, for gentle understanding. It reminded them all that life's most profound lessons often came not through spectacle or noise, but through quiet presence. Rick took a slow sip from his flask, watching the family absorb the pause. He allowed himself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. For once he had not disrupted or manipulated. He had simply provided a window, and now the stillness between the windows offered its own gift. He felt a quiet pride, not loud or boastful, but soft and profound. In this suspended moment, he recognized the delicate art of observing, of attending, and of simply letting life unfold with gentle attention. The hum of the device became a subtle background pulse, barely audible but comforting, like a heartbeat echoing across the room. Morty's breathing slowed, his eyes fluttering closed. Summer's gaze softened, her attention lingering on the faint shimmer of light across the floor. Jerry exhaled once more, a gentle sigh that seemed to release the tension of years spent feeling inadequate. Beth, in quiet reflection, allowed herself to rest in the warmth of the pause, absorbing its subtle lessons like a soft lullaby. Time stretched softly, measured not in minutes, but in the quality of presence. Each member of the family existed fully in the moment, aware of one another, aware of the gentle rhythm of breath and light, aware of the quiet grace in simply being. Rick, usually restless and untethered, allowed himself to linger in this calm, observing the profound simplicity of a shared pause. It was a reminder that even amidst absurdity and chaos, life offered moments of quiet reflection, moments of gentle connection, moments where presence alone could heal. And as the pause continued, the family felt its soft embrace, each exhale blending into the next, each heartbeat echoing a tender rhythm. Morty drifted further into the threshold of dreams. Summer leaned back with quiet acceptance. Jerry's soft smile lingered, and Beth allowed herself to rest in the subtle warmth. The pause between channels became more than a moment. It became a gentle sanctuary, a reminder that silence, when shared, is rich with care, empathy, and understanding. And with that, the family existed fully in the quiet, suspended in the soft glow of the invention, breathing, listening, reflecting. The pause carried its lesson, a whisper across time and space. Sometimes, the most profound experiences arrive not through action or spectacle, but through the tender presence of being, together. The garage was quiet, bathed in the soft, lingering glow of Rick's invention. The pause between channels had given the family space to breathe. And now, as the device flickered once more, faint images emerged on the screens, tiny vignettes of absurdity, of life in its most whimsical and tender forms. The air carried a warmth, subtle and reassuring, like the comfort of a familiar blanket. In this gentle space, Thai laughter began to ripple quietly, soft as wind over still water, touching each member of the family in its own delicate way. Morty's lips curved first, the small, hesitant smile of someone teetering on the edge of dreams. A channel flickered to life, showing two impossibly tall creatures tiptoeing along a string of stars, each movement careful, exaggerated, yet slightly clumsy. They wobbled, stumbled, and recovered, and Morty's soft laugh emerged unbidden, fragile yet genuine. It was not the loud, chaotic laughter of fear or surprise. It was the kind that settled in the chest. That made the heart feel lighter, while leaving a tender trace of warmth. Summer, leaning forward, allowed herself a quiet chuckle. Her voice was barely a whisper, a soft echo of Morty's amusement. She watched the creature's awkward pirouettes and felt a lightness that had been rare for her in recent years. There was no judgment, no sarcasm, only the gentle recognition of the joy that existed in imperfection. The absurdity, once potentially alien or alarming, had softened into a gentle, comforting rhythm, a melody of laughter that bound them together. Jerry, sitting slightly apart, felt the warmth of this shared amusement settle into him. A tiny character on the screen wore a hat too large for its head and carried a glowing sandwich across an impossibly thin bridge. It wobbled, hesitated, and finally tumbled with a light musical thud. Jerry exhaled softly, a laugh escaping him that was barely audible but entirely sincere. For once he felt included, connected, part of the gentle rhythm of family and humor. The absurdity spoke to him, whispered that even he, often awkward and overlooked, had a place in the soft chaos of the world. Beth observed with a calm, reflective smile. The images flickering on the screen were strange, impossible, and yet in their whimsy there was clarity. Life was rarely perfect, rarely straightforward. Yet here the imperfections were gentle, even tender, and they brought with them laughter. Laughter that was quiet, introspective, and shared. She felt the warmth of her children's presence, Jerry's inclusion, and the subtle care woven through Rick's invention. For a moment all worries and tensions faded, leaving only the soft glow of connection and amusement. Rick, leaning against the workbench, allowed himself a faint smirk. He had seen the absurdity he often orchestrated in other worlds, the chaos he usually unleashed, but tonight it was different. Tonight, the absurdity was a lullaby, a gentle cascade of humor that allowed the family to breathe and laugh softly together. He observed the nuances of each smile, each quiet chuckle, each delicate expression, and felt a rare sense of satisfaction. The invention had succeeded not in creating chaos, but in fostering warmth, laughter, and connection. The channels shifted again, revealing a tiny village of miniature beings, baking enormous pies that floated above their heads. The pies wobbled and tilted precariously, threatening to spill. Yet each time they fell, the creatures simply laughed and rearranged them with care. Morty's laugh became a little stronger, a soft ripple through the room, mirrored by Summer's gentle giggle. Jerry's faint chuckle joined, harmonizing with the quiet smiles and soft exhalations of the others. Beth's own amusement was quiet but sincere, a reflection of the tender recognition that life's absurdities could be shared, softened and appreciated together. The rhythm of laughter was gentle and cyclical, rising and falling with the movement of the channels. It was not forced or performative. It existed naturally, organically, growing from the shared experience of observing absurdity through the lens of warmth and care. Morty, feeling his eyes grow heavy, sensed that this laughter was different from any he had experienced before. It was not an escape or a reaction to danger. It was a quiet celebration of connection, of presence, and of the delicate beauty of the impossible. Summer rested her chin on her hands, watching a tiny creature balance a glowing teacup atop its head while walking a line of clouds. She let herself laugh softly, a whisper in the night. The sound was fragile, yet it carried weight, echoing through the garage in harmony with the faint hum of the invention. She realized that humor, when shared quietly and tenderly, had the power to heal, to bind, to soften hearts, even in the presence of imperfection or absurdity. Jerry, normally hesitant and awkward, found his voice in a barely audible exhale of amusement. The tiny beings on the screen stumbled, danced, and collided in playful, surreal ways, and he felt a subtle resonance with their efforts. There was no failure here, no judgment, only the gentle, continuous acknowledgement of trying, stumbling, and continuing with care and attention. In this soft shared laughter, Jerry found validation, belonging, and the comfort of being part of something larger than himself. Beth's reflection deepened as she watched the family respond to the absurdity. She understood that the comedy of the universe need not be loud or chaotic to matter. It could be tender, soft, and reflective, capable of inspiring laughter that was profound in its gentleness. She recognized the value in being present, in witnessing and sharing joy without expectation, in allowing imperfection to coexist with warmth and care. Rick allowed the laughter to continue, observing each family member with a quiet sense of accomplishment. The absurdity, once a tool for exploration and chaos, had been transformed into a vessel of connection and tenderness. Morty's soft giggles, Summer's gentle chuckles, Jerry's faint exhalations, and Beth's reflective smile intertwined, creating a symphony of subtle joy. It was a lullaby of shared amusement, delicate yet resonant, carrying with it the quiet power of unity and empathy. The screens flickered to show creatures exchanging gifts of glowing light, stumbling awkwardly in their attempts and smiling at their mistakes. Morty's soft laugh became a gentle rhythm, echoing the tiny stumbles and recoveries of the screen. Sama's gaze softened, and Jerry allowed himself to fully release into the warmth of the moment. Beth's smile deepened, and even Rick, usually detached and cynical, felt the delicate tug of connection. In that shared laughter, each member of the family understood, in their own way, that joy need not be loud or overwhelming. It could be quiet, reflective, and profound. The glow of the invention softened further, shadows stretching long across the garage floor. The rhythm of gentle shared laughter continued, slowing naturally as eyes grew heavier and breaths became deeper. Morty nestled into his corner, the soft smile lingering on his lips. Summer rested her head back against the chair, her eyes half closed. Jerry exhaled once more, soft and content. Beth allowed herself to sink slightly, absorbing the calm warmth of the room. Rick observed silently, feeling the quiet satisfaction of having created space for connection, reflection, and tender humor. And as the screens dimmed further, leaving only the soft hum of the invention, the family's laughter softened into quiet exhalations, a chorus of contentment. The lesson of gentle, shared laughter was clear. Joy, even in its most absurd or improbable forms, was magnified when experienced together, quietly and attentively. In the soft glow of the night, the family existed fully in presence, in warmth, and in the subtle rhythm of connection. In that tender pause, Morty, Summer, Jerry, and Beth felt the profound simplicity of laughter without chaos, humor without harm, absurdity without fear. Rick, alone yet connected through observation and care, allowed the moment to linger, savoring the delicate beauty of the night. Laughter had become a gentle anchor, binding them in quiet awareness, in shared tenderness, and in the soft rhythm of being together. And somewhere, amidst the fading glow and the tender hum, the family existed in harmony, each heartbeat and breath a quiet testament to the power of gentle, shared laughter, a reminder that even absurdity, when softened by care, could cradle the heart and soothe the soul. The gentle hum of the invention persisted, a soft, steady rhythm that seemed to breathe along with the family. The glow from the screens had softened to a twilight-like haze, casting delicate shadows across the garage floor. Each flicker, each tiny image no longer demanded attention. They had become whispers, fragments of distant worlds that floated into consciousness like drifting clouds. The night felt heavier, not in burden but in weight, the kind that presses softly, urging the mind and body toward rest, urging each soul to sink into the warmth of quiet reflection. Morty's eyelids drooped as he leaned into the corner of the couch, the edges of the glow painting faint light across his face. He felt the weight of the day, the weight of stories, laughter, and gentle absurdity pressing in, but pressing softly like a comforting hand across his shoulder. There was no urgency, no fear, only the slow, measured pull of sleep and contemplation. The night, it seemed, had its own rhythm now, a pulse that synced with his own heartbeat, with the hum of the invention, and with the quiet breaths of those around him. Summer rested her head lightly against her folded arms, gazing at the flickering shapes on the screen. The images were surreal, whimsical, and yet imbued with a soft melancholy. Tiny beings balanced glowing orbs, creatures sang lullabies of impossible melodies, and landscapes shifted in impossible ways. The humor was subtle, the absurdity gentle, but beneath it lay an unspoken truth. Even in chaos there could be tenderness, even in mistakes there could be beauty. Summer felt the warmth of this understanding seep into her chest, a gentle reassurance that the world's weight could be borne softly, together. Jerry, surprisingly calm, sank further into his seat. The ridiculousness of the channels, the small improbable disasters and their tender resolutions, was no longer laughable in a conventional sense. It was comforting. Each stumble, each gentle recovery echoed the quiet truth he had long overlooked. Imperfection is not failure, absurdity is not loss, and even the smallest acts, shared smiles, soft exhalations, gentle acknowledgement, can hold profound meaning. The night had grown heavy, yes, but it was a weight of warmth, of connection, of reflective presence, and he surrendered to it willingly. Beth's gaze wandered over the scene, drifting from the invention to her family. The laughter had subsided into soft exhalations, the absurdity had softened into gentle curiosity, and now the night's weight wrapped around her, a quiet blanket of understanding. The pause between channels had become a meditation, and the shared laughter had become a bridge. She felt the soft gravity of the moment, a slow sinking into calm, a recognition that life's deepest lessons are often delivered not in triumph or spectacle, but in stillness, in gentle reflection, in the warmth of being seen and being present. Rick stood slightly apart, hands in his pockets, his usual restlessness softened by observation. He allowed the quiet to fill him, the weight of the night settling into his chest. There were no explosions, no urgent adventures, no chaotic inventions demanding attention, only presence. The night had grown heavy, yes, but in that heaviness there was care, there was reflection. There was a strange, unexpected tenderness that he had not anticipated, but now deeply valued. He watched his family breathe in the quiet, and he felt something rare and unspoken, a sense of fulfillment that did not roar but whispered. The channels continued their soft, drifting parade of images, now more like shadows of dreams than active stories. Morty noticed the subtle transitions, the way one image flowed into another, and he felt himself growing lighter despite the heaviness pressing softly into his limbs. The night had a gravity that was not oppressive but anchoring, a force that drew attention inward to the soft connections and small wonders that existed quietly around him. He exhaled slowly, letting the moment carry him further into its embrace. Summer's fingers traced absent-minded patterns on her knees, her mind hovering between the surreal imagery on the screen and the comforting hum of the invention. The night's weight pressed gently, urging her toward the edge of sleep without demand or fear. She realized that the heaviness was not something to resist, but something to accept, to allow the mind to wander, to let the body rest, to feel the calm gravity of a moment held together by laughter, reflection, and soft absurdity. Jerry's soft breath became part of the rhythm of the room, a quiet accompaniment to the gentle chorus of the invention's hum and the subdued glow of light. He felt a connection, fragile yet real, to the others. The night had grown heavy, yes, but it had done so evenly, distributing its weight across shared presence, across small smiles, across whispered acknowledgement of being alive in the same space. For the first time in a long time, Jerry felt grounded, wrapped in something that was both absurd and tender, a paradox that now seemed perfectly natural. Beth's attention drifted back to the screens, where tiny creatures balanced improbable objects or sang songs with voices like soft chimes. Each act of absurdity carried no urgency, only a tender rhythm that mirrored the slow unfolding of the night. She allowed herself to feel the heaviness press gently, filling her chest with warmth and reflection. In the quiet, she recognized that these small tender moments, absurd, gentle, fleeting, were as meaningful as any grand gesture or loud triumph. The night had grown heavy, but in it there was fullness, there was care, there was quiet awe. Morty, feeling the weight of sleep tug at him, let his head sink lower into the soft corner where he sat. His eyelids closed slowly, each blink a small surrender to the gentle gravity pressing around him. The night had grown heavy, yes, but not oppressive. It carried a lesson. The weight of shared presence, the gravity of quiet reflection, the soft embrace of absurdity and warmth, all of these could cradle the heart, prepare the mind for rest, and leave a lingering sense of calm and connection. Summer's soft exhale joined the chorus, mingling with Morty's slowing breath, Jerry's gentle sighs, and Beth's quiet acknowledgement of the moment. Rick observed silently, noting the interplay of light, shadow, and shared presence. The night's weight had become a quiet teacher, illustrating that heaviness could be tender, gravity could soothe, and the passage of time could be gentle when observed with care and attention. The glow of the screens dimmed further, merging with the shadows of the room. The invention's hum softened into a lullaby, a subtle, comforting vibration that resonated through the family. Morty drifted into the threshold of sleep. Summer's eyes grew heavier, Jerry's chest rose and fell with slow, steady rhythm, and Beth allowed herself to rest in the embrace of the moment. Rick stood quietly, flask in hand, and let the gravity of the night sink into him, feeling a rare sense of calm and connection that required no words. As the night grew heavier, the family became almost indistinguishable from the soft shadows, part of the rhythm of light, hum, and gentle absurdity. The pause, the laughter, and the reflective wait had converged into a single moment, a sanctuary suspended between reality and dream. In the soft pressure of night, they existed fully, together, grounded in the warmth of shared presence, wrapped in the subtle gravity of connection and care. And in that quiet heaviness, Morty, Summer, Jerry, and Beth felt the profound truth of the night. Even in the vast expanse of absurdity, in the stretch of surreal stories, in the slow crawl of time, there could be safety, warmth, and gentle understanding. Rick, observing from a slight distance, allowed the moment to linger, understanding that this quiet weight, this soft heaviness, was perhaps the most precious gift of all, the gift of presence, reflection, and the tender gravity of love and family. The glow from Rick's invention had softened into a gentle twilight, almost indistinguishable from the shadows pooling in the corners of the garage. The hum of the device was now a subtle, soothing vibration, a quiet heartbeat in the stillness of the night. Morty's head rested lightly against the sofa arm, his breaths long and even, each exhale a small surrender to the warmth and calm of the room. He was halfway between wakefulness and dreams, a place where imagination wandered freely, unfettered by urgency or expectation. Summer leaned back in her chair, eyelids heavy, the glow of the screens tracing soft patterns across her face. Her fingers twitched slightly as she reached out to brush against the edge of a cushion, almost as if testing the boundary between reality and the gentle dreamscape forming around her. She could hear Morty's slow breaths, faintly audible in the quiet, and it drew her into a sense of connection. Though the world outside might demand sharpness or vigilance, here, in this pause between absurdity and reflection, she could exist simply, soft, present, and at ease. Jerry, usually a figure of clumsy anxiety, had grown still. The ridiculous channels that flickered with soft absurdity now barely registered to his conscious mind. Instead, he felt the warmth of proximity, the shared weight of quiet moments, the gentle hum of the invention, the subtle exhalations and rhythms of the others. He was half asleep, not forced into it, but drawn gently by the gravity of calm, by the soft insistence of night pressing lightly, like a reassuring hand across his shoulder. For once he felt safe to let go, to surrender to the slow pulse of the world around him. Beth observed them, her posture relaxed in a way it rarely was outside of this shared pause. The screen still flickered with impossible stories, creatures balancing glowing objects, tiny beings exchanging gifts of light, landscapes folding into themselves like careful origami. Yet none of it demanded action, none of it required judgment. It was a drifting river of gentle absurdity, carrying the family along in its soft current. Beth's chest rose and fell in time with the subtle rhythm, and she felt her mind unwinding from the constant churn of worry. Half asleep, half attentive, she realized that the weight of care could also be a gift, a blanket that allowed her to rest without guilt, to observe without control, to exist without performance. Morty's small yawn slipped past lips slightly, parted, and in that tiny gesture the room's shared reality shifted further toward dreams. The soft patterns of light, the gentle flickers, the quiet exhalations from Summer, Jerry, and Beth, all combined into a lullaby more potent than any audible melody. He felt the surreal images of the invention seep into the corners of his imagination, melting into each other, forming a mosaic of whimsical wonder and tender memory. He was not chasing adventure or chaos tonight. He was simply breathing in presence, letting the gentle gravity of connection carry him closer to the edge of sleep. Summer's eyelids drooped further, her head tilting slightly, as if to rest completely against the soft fabric of the chair. The faint images on the screen, once amusing and absurd, now blurred into colors and shapes like dreams brushing against waking thoughts. She felt a serene lightness settle in her chest, an awareness that the absurdity around her could exist, without fear, without expectation, simply as a vessel for calm and reflection. Here in this liminal space, she could exist fully in comfort, half asleep. yet profoundly aware of the subtle rhythm of family and warmth surrounding her. Jerry's hand rested lightly on his lap, fingers curling and uncurling in slow repetition. The weight of the night pressed gently, almost insistently urging him toward rest. He felt a quiet satisfaction in the act of surrender, a realization that it was okay to be passive, to be carried along by the gentle current of the world rather than attempting to control it. The invention hummed softly, each vibration a small nudge toward dreams, toward calm, toward a safe space where the family could exist in shared presence, quietly half asleep, yet wholly connected. Beth watched the soft interplay of light and shadow, the muted movements of her family drifting closer to sleep. She could see Morty's chest rising and falling, Summer's fingers slackening, Jerry's gentle exhalations, and she felt a quiet gratitude. It was not the kind of gratitude that demanded acknowledgement or performance, but the internal reflective kind, the kind that whispers to the heart and lingers there. In this moment, the family was bound not by words or actions, but by shared presence, by the soft exhalations and gentle rhythms that marked the threshold between wakefulness and dreams. Rick, standing slightly apart, observed without interference. He did not need to manipulate, to guide, or to create chaos. Tonight, his invention had done what it was always capable of. Though rarely directed toward tenderness, it had created space for reflection, warmth, and the soft embrace of rest. He noted the half-closed eyes of his family, the small sighs, the gentle curling of limbs into corners of comfort. He understood silently that this was a rare gift, one not measured in explosions or interdimensional antics, but in subtle shifts of presence and consciousness. The screens flickered once more, projecting impossible images of tiny creatures floating on clouds, exchanging glowing orbs of light, and balancing fragile, luminous objects. Each vignette was absurd yet tender, funny yet bittersweet, and it dissolved into the dim glow of the garage without demanding notice. Morty's head tilted against the sofa cushion, Summer's eyelids closed fully, Jerry's breathing softened further, and Beth allowed herself to sink entirely into the gentle weight of night. The family, half asleep, had become a single vessel of calm presence, a quiet testament to the power of shared stillness. As the moments stretched, the invention's hum softened to a near whisper, the glow of the screens dimmed to an ambient twilight, and the garage itself seemed to exhale. Morty's mind drifted between fragments of what he had seen and half-formed dreams, merging the whimsical absurdity of the channels with the warmth of shared laughter and presence. Summer's thoughts blurred into gentle imaginings. Jerry's heart accepted the stillness without hesitation, and Beth experienced a soft reflection of love, connection, and acceptance, woven through the subtle absurdity of the evening. Rick, finally allowing himself to breathe fully, watched the half-asleep forms of his family. The night had grown heavy gently, and it had carried them all toward this shared threshold of dreams. He understood quietly that this weight was not oppressive but tender, not demanding but guiding and entirely necessary. He allowed the soft glow and hum to envelop him as well, sensing that the moment would linger, a memory crystallized in warmth, reflection, and gentle absurdity. The family existed in perfect harmony with the dimming light, the hum and the soft rhythm of presence. Morty's lips curled slightly in a sleeping smile. Summer's head rested fully against the chair. Jerry exhaled quietly in his chest, and Beth allowed her body to soften completely. The invention's light faded into muted shadows, leaving only the soft impression of warmth, laughter, and calm absurdity, a memory that would linger beyond the night. Though unspoken and unobserved in full consciousness, and somewhere, in the gentle hum, the dim glow and the half-slumber of the family, there was a truth silently acknowledged, presence and care, laughter and absurdity, reflection and warmth. They were enough. In this half-asleep state, each family member rested in the gentle gravity of the night, bound together not by action or words, but by the quiet embrace of shared humanity and tender absurdity. The night had settled over the house like a gentle quilt, soft and embracing, holding each family member in a weightless calm that was rare, almost foreign. Rick stood in the doorway of the garage, eyes lingering on the fading glow of his invention. The hum, now a delicate whisper, seemed to breathe with the room, carrying warmth and quiet reassurance. For once he felt the absence of chaos not as emptiness, but as presence, a gentle reminder that he had given something unexpected tonight, not a solution, not an adventure, not even a lesson in survival, but something softer, subtler, and infinitely more precious. He watched Morty, curled up on the sofa, head resting against the cushion, face soft with the weight of sleep. Morty's chest rose and fell in even rhythm, a delicate balance of exhalations and inhalations that mirrored the faint hum of the invention. Rick felt a flicker of something unusual in his chest, a quiet pride, a recognition that what he had offered his grandson tonight was not chaos or spectacle, but a safe harbor, a bridge into reflection, empathy, and tender curiosity. He realized with a weight that was heavy yet light at the same time that even he could be a caretaker, even he could offer softness without diminishing himself. Summer sat nearby, her head tilted slightly, eyelids closed, fingers curled loosely against her lap. She had succumbed fully to the gravity of the night, and Rick could see the calm settling into her posture. Her presence, once marked by sharpness and guarded curiosity, now radiated an openness that made his chest ache softly with recognition. She had leaned forward. She had laughed quietly. She had observed with wonder. And tonight she allowed herself to simply exist in that wonder without question or judgment. Rick felt the weight of pride deepen, not in control or in brilliance, but in connection, in seeing the impact of his creation gently shaping the world around him. Jerry's breathing had slowed to a peaceful cadence, his body relaxed and soft, free of the usual tension that clung to him like a second skin. Rick noticed how the absurdity of the channels, creatures balancing impossible objects, tiny worlds unfolding with surreal logic, had coaxed him into a rare acceptance. Jerry, so often anxious, so often fractured by his own perception of inadequacy, had found refuge in the soft humor, in the quiet rhythm, in the shared presence of his family. Rick's pride was quiet, reflective, almost shy, but it pulsed nonetheless. He had given even Jerry a gentle, unspoken reassurance that he belonged, that his laughter, no matter how awkward, had its place. Beth, seated with a slight slump of relaxation, allowed her chest to soften with each breath. She had observed alternate selves on the screens, witnessed the endless branching of choices, and yet had not been weighed down by perfection or failure. Instead, she exhaled quietly, and Rick felt the subtle shift in the room, the knowledge that what he had offered was more than entertainment or distraction. It was reflection, a mirror of life softened by absurdity and humor. The pride in his chest grew a little stronger, tempered by the awareness that these small, quiet gestures could resonate deeply, leaving marks unseen but profoundly felt. The screens themselves flickered softly, images now more like shadows than active stories. A creature balancing a glowing orb on its head, another reaching across a tiny canyon to offer a gift of light. Landscapes folding in on themselves like careful origami. The absurdity was gentle, the comedy muted, the lessons subtle. Rick realized that in giving these moments to his family, he had allowed them to explore the intersection of laughter, reflection, and quiet connection, a space where absurdity softened the edges of life, and the night carried them gently toward rest. Morty stirred slightly, murmuring something incoherent in his half-sleep, and Rick's chest swelled with warmth. He understood that these fragments of experience, dreamlike, fleeting, absurd, would linger in Morty's heart. Morty would awaken with the echo of tenderness, the memory of shared laughter and gentle reflection, even if the details escaped him. That was enough. That was the gift. The quiet, unassuming assurance that the night could hold them all, that humor could coexist with reflection, that chaos could be tempered into softness, if only for a while. Summer shifted, half turning toward Morty, and Rick noticed the subtle smile curling on her lips. Even in sleep, she seemed to recognize the absurdity and the comfort of the moment. He allowed himself a small private smirk, not of arrogance but of acknowledgement. He had achieved something rare. He had given them a night that would be remembered not for its events, but for its feeling, a gentle weight, a soft rhythm, a quiet affirmation that even the most fractured family could exist in harmony, if only for a fleeting moment. Jerry's soft sigh punctuated the stillness, a rhythm in tandem with the faint hum of the invention. Rick felt it resonate within him, a reflection of his own internal softening. The pride was no longer a spark, but a steady glow, warming the edges of his usual cynicism. nudging him toward the rare acknowledgement that he could contribute positively, that he could offer more than disruption, that he could, in his own rough way, cultivate a space of tenderness and reflection. Beth exhaled a long, slow breath, and Rick's eyes lingered on her features, softened in repose. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the permanence of this feeling, the quiet pride in seeing his family present, calm, reflective, and connected. He understood the paradox. The weight of his pride was soft, not burdening, expansive, not possessive. He had done nothing dramatic, nothing that would make tales of heroism, but in his own quiet way, he had achieved a subtle form of greatness. He had crafted a sanctuary of calm in the middle of chaos, the hum of the invention, the dimming glow, the half-formed shadows of impossible stories, and the serene rhythms of his family all converged in a quiet symphony. Rick felt the pride settle deeper, not in words, not in action, but in observation, the realization that he had created an experience of connection, of warmth, of laughter, tempered by reflection. It was fragile, fleeting, and entirely enough. Morty's small stir, Summer's relaxed posture, Jerry's soft exhalation, Beth's calm gaze, all echoed the quiet achievement. Rick's flask rested lightly in his hand, a grounding object in a room that hummed with subtle life. He did not sip, did not speak. He simply allowed himself to feel the weight and warmth of his impact. Pride, he realized, could be quiet, almost secretive, but still profound, still shaping, still meaningful. The night deepened further, and Rick understood that his gift had extended beyond entertainment or absurdity. He had given his family the space to exist together, to share laughter and reflection, to be half asleep and yet wholly present. The hum of the invention, now almost imperceptible, seemed to echo this sentiment. The quiet pride of a moment held softly, a bridge between chaos and tenderness, between humor and reflection, between being and belonging. Rick allowed a final glance around the garage, at his half-asleep family, at the soft glow of impossible stories, and at the quiet hum of his creation. The pride in his chest was steady now, a warm pulse of contentment. For once he had not disrupted, not challenged, not provoked, but had created a night of subtle care, soft absurdity, and reflective warmth. And in that quiet pride he realized there was a rare, unspoken joy, the knowledge that the night, heavy with calm, had carried them all safely into shared reflection. The quiet of the night had settled over the house like a velvet sheet, pressing softly against the edges of thought, urging each mind within to slow and linger. Summer lay half-reclined in her chair, eyelids heavy, chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. The faint glow of Rick's invention painted soft patterns across her face, the colors bending and folding like distant, impossible sunsets. She had watched the absurdities flicker on the screen for hours, creatures balancing spheres of light, landscapes bending on their own accord, tiny worlds where laughter and confusion coexisted in delicate harmony. And she realized that she had not needed to understand any of it. She didn't need clarity to feel the beauty of it. She didn't need reason to grasp the warmth it left behind, and in that recognition, her body softened further, shoulders loosening, lips curling slightly in a half-smile, not out of amusement, but quiet wonder. For once she sensed that the universe did not demand her sharpness or scrutiny. She could lean back, let her mind wander, and simply observe the world through the lens of gentle curiosity, finding comfort in the absurdity without attempting to control it. The soft hum of the invention filled the room with an almost tangible serenity. Morty, still resting on the sofa with the soft weight of dreams pulling him downward, shifted slightly, murmuring a small sound of contentment. His presence, half dreaming, half aware, reinforced the strange but soothing notion that she was not alone in this moment. The absurd channels, the impossible stories, the muted laughter that had emerged earlier, they were all part of a tapestry, fragile and intricate, in which she and her family existed together, even if only for a night. Summer's thoughts drifted to Rick, standing quietly in the corner, observing without interference. There had always been chaos in his presence, a raw, untamed energy that seemed to warp reality itself. And yet tonight, the chaos had softened, folded into something tender, something reflective. He had given them an experience that demanded nothing but attention, a space where laughter and sadness could coexist gently, where absurdity could be comforting rather than overwhelming. Summer felt an unexpected warmth for him, a gratitude so subtle that it could almost be mistaken for a thoughtless emotion. She realized that love in its gentlest form often wore a mask of absurdity and reflection. She let her gaze wander to Jerry, slouched comfortably in his chair, half asleep yet content. The ridiculousness of the channels had coaxed a soft belonging from him, a fragile acceptance of presence without performance. Summer had often felt irritation at Jerry's awkwardness, impatience at his hesitation, and frustration at his neediness. But tonight, watching him settle into the absurd humor with a gentle smile tugging at the corners of his lips, she understood that even he had a place in this odd, quiet mosaic. There was a softness to belonging, and a gentle realization that imperfection could be part of the calm. Beth, seated nearby, had been watching an alternate version of herself flicker across the screen, choices branching like rivers, small divergences shaping alternate realities. The weight of reflection had always pressed heavily upon Beth, but tonight the images seemed lighter, playful even, a quiet reminder that being human included endless possibilities, none of which needed to be mastered to be valuable. Summer felt a shared understanding with her mother, a subtle echo of empathy passing silently between them. The realization deepened. Beauty often resided not in perfection or clarity, but in the ability to notice and to let be. Summer's own chest rose and fell with the gentle rhythm of her family. She felt the laughter that had emerged earlier, not sharp or loud but delicate, chiming softly in the air. It mingled with the faint hum of Rick's invention and the filtered glow of impossible stories. And in that moment, she understood something fundamental. She did not need to grasp the entirety of the world to feel connected to it. She could lean into wonder, lean into absurdity, and find meaning simply in presence. The absurd channels, the surreal imagery, the quiet murmurs of her family, all were a testament to the simplicity of awareness, of feeling, of being alive within the soft embrace of night. The soft exhalation of air from Morty's chest, the quiet shift of Jerry's hand against his lap, the almost imperceptible blink from Beth. Each movement was a punctuation in the gentle symphony of togetherness. Summer allowed herself to become fully aware of it, to feel the subtle ties binding them, and she realized that understanding did not always require words. Sometimes the gift was presence itself. She felt herself relax fully, shoulders dropping further, lips parting slightly, eyelids fluttering as the pull of dreams tugged at her consciousness. The invention's glow continued to shift softly, casting ever-morphing shapes across the room. Summer watched the colors drift and fold like slow waves, and she noticed that the absurdity no longer felt alien or demanding. Instead, it resonated with the quiet pulse of the night, the rhythm of the family's breathing, the soft weight of shared presence. It reminded her that life, much like these fleeting images, did not always need to be understood. It only needed to be felt. And the feeling tonight was of calm wonder and gentle connection. Summer's mind drifted into half-dreams, her thoughts folding into the soft absurdities on the screens, merging with fragments of the family's quiet interactions. She imagined herself floating gently through the channels, not searching, not questioning, only observing and absorbing. And in that imaginative drift, she felt the profound truth of the night. She could exist fully without needing to prove herself, fully without needing to dissect or control, fully without urgency or expectation. Presence, reflection, and wonder were enough. The hum of the invention softened further, and the glow diminished into a gentle twilight. Summer's head tilted slightly, her chin resting against her chest, eyes closing completely. She felt the warmth of her family like a protective current, carrying her, supporting her, and she allowed herself to float within it. Morty's peaceful breathing, Jerry's soft contentment, Beth's reflective calm and the quiet, proud presence of Rick all merged into a single invisible cocoon of warmth, absurdity, and gentle understanding. In these moments, Summer's realization solidified. The world did not always demand explanation, action, or comprehension. Sometimes the world simply asked to be felt, to be noticed, to be absorbed with wonder and care. She realized that beauty and meaning could reside in the soft absurdity of life, in the shared breath of those we love, in the gentle acceptance of imperfection, and in the quiet rhythm of night. And with that understanding, she let herself drift fully, her thoughts dissolving into dreamlike fragments of color, light and warmth. As the night deepened, and the invention's hum became nearly imperceptible, Summer's chest rose and fell in a perfect cadence with the world around her. She felt herself woven into the fabric of the room, a thread in the quiet tapestry of family, absurdity and tender reflection. The soft absurdities of the channels, once perplexing and strange, now felt like lullabies, each flicker and glow a gentle reminder that even the most chaotic and surreal aspects of life could soothe the heart if approached with openness and presence. And in the embrace of this night, Summer's gentle realization settled like a soft exhale. She did not need to understand everything to feel its beauty. She could exist quietly, observing, absorbing, connecting. And that, she knew, was enough, more than enough, to rest in the warmth of family, the calm of absurdity, and the tender, reflective wonder of the world as it quietly unfolded around her. The room had grown even quieter, the glow of Rick's invention dimming into a soft, almost imperceptible light. The hum, a gentle vibration through the floorboards and walls, carried a warmth that threaded through the entire family. Beth sat beside Jerry, their bodies close enough to feel the small rise and fall of each other's breathing. The absurdity of the channels had faded into whispers of color and shadow, and yet the warmth of shared presence lingered. In this fragile silence, Beth and Jerry felt a rare stillness between them, a moment suspended in time, delicate as a soap bubble, yet undeniably real. Jerry's gaze lingered on Beth, her face softened by the gentle glow, her eyes closed as she leaned back slightly in her chair. He felt a tug at his chest, a quiet awareness that the distance and tension that had always defined their relationship tonight seemed to loosen, dissolving not in words or confrontation, but in the subtle weight of shared observation. The absurd stories and impossible images on the screen had created a space where judgment was unnecessary, where perfection was irrelevant, and where being present with each other was enough. Jerry's chest expanded slightly as he allowed himself to exhale fully, the warmth of unity threading through his body. Beth, feeling the subtle warmth from Jerry's presence, recognized the small miracle of the moment. There was no loud laughter, no sharp criticism, no hidden resentment, only a fragile understanding that sometimes connection could exist in quiet gestures, in proximity, in the simple act of being. The absurd channels, once chaotic and distracting, now served as a kind of lullaby, a rhythm that carried them toward a delicate peace. She felt her mind soften, the habitual stress and overthinking that often dominated her awareness, melting into the gentle hum of shared existence. Jerry reached a tentative hand toward hers, brushing fingertips lightly against Beth's. She felt the contact, subtle but deliberate, and allowed herself to meet it halfway. No words passed between them, none were necessary, but the touch spoke volumes. It was a promise not of perfection, not of resolution, but of recognition. They were here together, half asleep, half aware, and fully present in the fragile harmony that had emerged from the quiet absurdity of the night. The moment felt delicate, like a single note held in the air, vibrating with possibility. The glow from the invention painted gentle shadows across their faces, softening the edges, erasing the sharp lines of fatigue and frustration that usually marked their interactions. They watched silently, as a tiny creature on the screen balanced a luminous orb on its head, wobbling but maintaining perfect rhythm. The absurdity was no longer alarming. It had become a mirror for their own tentative balance, a reflection of how imperfection could exist alongside calm and even beauty. Beth felt a soft smile tug at the corners of her lips, mirrored faintly by Jerry's own tentative expression. For years, moments like this had been rare, fleeting, and often overshadowed by argument, misunderstanding, or fear. But tonight, the absurdity of interdimensional channels had created a space where those tensions could dissolve, where laughter and wonder softened into reflection, and where fragile unity could bloom without expectation. Beth and Jerry did not speak, yet they communicated through presence, through soft gestures, and through the shared rhythm of breathing and heartbeat. Each inhalation and exhalation was a note in a gentle symphony that threaded through the quiet room. Beth's thoughts drifted to the long stretches of her life, the times she had carried the weight of expectations, the constant push and pull of responsibility. And yet in this quiet, she realized that connection did not demand perfection. It demanded presence, acknowledgement, and sometimes nothing more than the willingness to simply exist alongside another person. Jerry, with his habitual awkwardness and tentative nature, had offered nothing dramatic, yet had given something essential: openness, willingness, and a soft acceptance of shared absurdity. Their fragile unity, delicate as a wisp of smoke, was profound in its simplicity. The channels flickered lightly, showing a brief, impossible landscape where gravity bent gently, and colors shifted like soft clouds at twilight. Beth and Jerry observed, and in the small silent observation, they found a resonance with their own relationship. It had always been complex, layered with disappointments, humor, and misunderstandings, but tonight complexity had been tempered by simplicity. The absurdity of the images on the screen mirrored the absurdity of life itself, and yet the reflection was gentle, not chaotic, playful, not threatening. Beth felt a rare sense of gratitude for the small, almost invisible threads binding them. Jerry's hand, still lightly touching Beth's, was a grounding force in the delicate stillness. He felt the warmth of her presence and for once did not flinch or shrink from it. Instead, he allowed himself to rest, to breathe, to be part of the fragile symphony of family that had emerged through laughter, absurdity, and soft reflection. The channel's stories, half-formed and fleeting, had given him a gift he had never expected: the awareness that he, too, belonged here in this quiet, in this night. In this tender understanding, Beth's chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the room, her mind wandering to the endless branching of possibilities, the what-ifs and could-bes, and realizing that tonight none of that mattered. The moment was sufficient. They were together, and in the stillness the tension that usually weighed upon their hearts had softened into a delicate echo of trust. She felt a sense of wonder at the absurdity of it all, how channels of impossible imagery and soft, muted comedy could coax a fragile but undeniable unity from years of conflict and distance. A quiet laughter escaped Jerry, soft and tentative, as a tiny, improbable creature on the screen performed a series of clumsy, impossible maneuvers. Beth allowed herself a soft exhale, recognizing the echo of shared amusement. It was not loud or boisterous. It was a gentle acknowledgement, a delicate connection reinforced by absurdity and observation. The universe, in its infinite strangeness, had carved a moment of grace, a fragile understanding, a unity that did not need ceremony or words to exist. Time seemed to fold in upon itself, the soft glow of the invention mingling with the darkness outside the windows, creating a cocoon of warmth and calm. Beth and Jerry's breaths synchronized, not in effort but in natural rhythm, each inhalation and exhalation reinforcing the quiet bond that had formed. They were fragile, yes, but also undeniable. In the soft absurdity of the night, they had discovered a truth often overlooked. Even in imperfection, even in quietness, there was a form of profound unity: the family's quiet laughter, the gentle hum of the invention, and the soft shadows cast across their faces, all intertwined into a lullaby of presence and reflection. Beth and Jerry felt the fragile strength of their connection, the weightless but persistent reminder that sometimes the simplest gestures, touch, observation, shared silence, could carry more meaning than words or explanations. The absurd, fleeting images on the screen had done more than entertain. They had created a space for acknowledgement, for quiet belonging, and for a fragile unity that would linger long after the glow had faded. Beth's eyes finally closed fully, resting against the softness of her chair, and Jerry leaned slightly closer, no longer fearful of proximity. Their fragile unity, delicate as a whisper, had become real. The soft absurdity of the interdimensional channels had offered them not answers, not resolutions, but the most profound gift of all: the awareness that together, even imperfectly, they could exist, share, and rest in the warmth of shared presence. And as the night deepened further, the gentle hum faded into near silence, leaving only the slow, steady rhythm of two hearts breathing in tandem. Fragile, delicate, and entirely enough, Beth and Jerry drifted into sleep, suspended in the quiet, absurd, tender world that Rick had created for them all. The hum of the invention had softened into a gentle purr, a barely there vibration that seemed to merge with the quiet breath of the house. Morty lay stretched on the sofa, his eyes half closed, mind drifting in that delicate space between wakefulness and dreams. The soft flicker of light from the interdimensional channels played across his face, casting gentle shadows and pools of muted color, like moonlight spilling over familiar furniture, turning the ordinary into something subtly magical. He did not speak. He did not need to. The gratitude he felt for this night, for his family and for Rick's strange, tender gift settled quietly in his chest, as weightless as a feather, but warm enough to hold him gently in place. Morty thought of Rick. The usual storm of chaotic energy tempered tonight into something soft and reflective. Normally, Rick's presence demanded attention, his brilliance often wrapped in sarcasm, frustration, or abrupt bursts of wild unpredictability. But tonight, the chaos had folded itself into wonder. He had given them laughter mingled with softness, absurdity blended with reflection. Morty's chest swelled subtly with thankfulness, not loud or showy, but steady and persistent, far like the slow pulse of stars across a night sky. He realized he didn't need to say the words aloud. The quiet knowing itself was enough. Across the room, Summer lay half-reclined, her thoughts already adrift in dreamlike reflection, while Beth and Jerry rested, their breaths deepening into slow, even rhythms. Morty felt a connection that was unspoken, almost imperceptible, a web of shared presence woven from the hum of the invention, the gentle laughter that had emerged earlier, and the soft glow spilling into every corner. He understood, without needing confirmation, that he belonged in this fragile, quiet network of love and imperfection. And that understanding, simple yet profound, stirred a small, silent smile to his lips. He thought back to the absurd programs they had watched, the commercials that made no sense, the tiny worlds bending and folding in ways that defied reason, the creatures who existed solely to wobble and tumble in impossible harmony. What had once seemed chaotic or nonsensical now felt deliberate, as if each flicker of light, each absurd tableau, had been created to remind him of something he had always known but rarely felt, that even in strangeness, even in humor, there was care. The universe, in its infinite absurdity, had carved a gentle space for him to rest, to reflect, and to feel quietly whole. Morty's thoughts drifted to Rick again, standing quietly by the corner, flask in hand, watching the family without needing acknowledgement or thanks. He imagined the countless nights Rick had given to chaos and adventure. The world spun into confusion and peril, and yet here he had chosen softness. Morty's gratitude was layered and complex, thankful for the experiences, for the love, for the laughter that wasn't sharp or demanding, and for the rare moments where chaos became lullaby. He felt the quiet weight of it, not pressing, not urgent, but grounding him in the gentle present. Even Jerry and Beth, normally at odds or distant in thought, had softened into a rhythm that he could feel without looking. The subtle alignment of their breaths, the faint touch of hands, the delicate humor still hanging in the air. It all converged into a quiet harmony that Morty absorbed fully, silently. He felt connected to each family member in a way that words could not capture, a resonance that vibrated through his chest like the softest chord of a lullaby. It was an intimate gratitude, one that required nothing more than awareness. He thought about the small absurdities, the channels that seemed so meaningless on the surface. There had been a man selling doors that led nowhere, a cloud that rained tiny sandwiches, a creature that balanced stars on its head only to let them float into the air again. Each of these images, so fleeting and ridiculous, held a quiet resonance. Morty understood that the gratitude he felt was not only for his family, but also for the gift of seeing life in all its contradictions, the funny and the sad, the absurd and the tender, coexisting in the same space. The feeling was deep and soft, stretching quietly across the bounds of the room and into the night beyond. Morty's breathing slowed, settling into a gentle cadence with the quiet rhythm of the house. He allowed himself to notice the small things, the gentle hum of the invention, the faint light pooling across the sofa cushions, the distant murmur of wind brushing against the windows. These tiny details grounded him in gratitude, reminding him that care existed even in the smallest elements, that moments of tenderness were often hidden in what might otherwise be overlooked. It was a quiet kind of awe, one that nestled into the heart like a soft blanket, comforting and unassuming. He pictured Rick's half-smile, a soft, private acknowledgement of the night's subtle magic. Morty understood that he did not need to say thank you aloud. The recognition of effort, the awareness of intention, and the quiet acceptance of care were enough to fill the room with warmth. It was a gratitude not seeking reward, not needing acknowledgement, simply existing as a presence, as a pulse that harmonized with the slow rhythm of the night. Summer stirred slightly, a gentle sigh escaping her lips, while Beth's and Jerry's faces relaxed further in the calm. Morty's chest lifted, carrying a fullness that had nothing to do with excitement and everything to do with presence. He realized that even laughter, tempered with quiet reflection, could be an expression of care, and that even silence, when shared, could convey love more profoundly than words. The absurdity of the interdimensional channels had acted as a bridge, connecting hearts across quiet moments and fleeting glimpses, reminding him that tenderness often hid behind the most unexpected forms. As his eyelids grew heavier, Morty let himself sink further into the sofa, body weight melting into cushions, mind softening into half-dreams. He thought of the channels as lullabies now, each absurd image a note in a gentle, slow melody, designed to soothe the spirit rather than startle it. The world, in all its chaotic brilliance, had become a quiet sanctuary, and Morty's gratitude, though silent, radiated across the room, wrapping each family member in an invisible warmth, a reminder that presence, awareness, and reflection were more than enough. Morty's thoughts drifted one last time to Rick, standing alone in the soft glow, eyes distant yet filled with a warmth he rarely showed. He felt a quiet appreciation, a subtle awe for the man who had turned chaos into comfort, absurdity into tenderness. Morty's gratitude was both personal and universal, a recognition of care given, of lessons imparted without demand, and of moments shaped not by perfection but by presence. It was the kind of gratitude that could exist entirely in the heart, unspoken and yet profoundly felt. The glow from the invention dimmed further, the room bathed in the softest twilight. Morty's body relaxed completely, each muscle loosening in response to the night's gentle rhythm. His mind drifted into dreams, carrying the quiet warmth, the absurdity, and the tenderness with him. Gratitude had become a quiet companion, nestled deep within his chest. As he floated toward the boundary between wakefulness and sleep, in that liminal space, Morty realized something profound. The gift of tonight was not only in laughter or reflection, but in the shared presence of family, the gentle absurdity of the world, and the quiet awareness of care. Even without words, even without grand gestures, he understood that love, gratitude, and connection could exist entirely in silence, in observation, and in shared stillness. And with that understanding, his chest lifted in one final gentle exhale, merging with the rhythm of the house, the hum of the invention, and the quiet pulse of night. Morty's gratitude remained, silent and steadfast, a small, unassuming light in the vastness of the evening. The night embraced him, the invention's hum a soft lullaby, and the family lay around him, bound together in ways both obvious and invisible. It was enough, it had always been enough, and he felt the profound comfort of knowing that even in the chaos of the universe, moments like these existed, tender and unhurried, waiting quietly to be noticed. And as sleep finally claimed him fully, Morty carried that silent gratitude into dreams, a warmth he would not forget, a reflection of care, wonder, and family that lingered long after the light dimmed completely. The soft glow of the interdimensional channels had begun to wane, folding gently into shadows that pooled across the walls and furniture. Morty's quiet breath mingled with the low hum of Rick's invention, forming a rhythm almost musical in its stillness. He lay curled against the sofa cushions, fully surrendered to the weight of sleep, his chest rising and falling in harmony with the room. Summer, Beth, and Jerry, each tucked into their own corners, had begun their slow descent into dreams, faces relaxed, bodies softened, and eyelids heavy with the gentle pull of the night. The screens that had once projected endless absurdities, clouds raining sandwiches, creatures balancing glowing orbs, doors leading nowhere, now flickered less frequently. Their images became muted and stretched, dissolving like lanterns drifting into a misty, infinite sky. Morty's half-formed awareness traced the edges of these fading images, sensing in their retreat a gentle lesson. Even in chaos, there is an end, a quiet conclusion that does not need fanfare. The dimming screens mirrored the slow dimming of thoughts, the soft settling of emotions that had swirled like wind around the room. Rick, standing slightly apart from the family, held his flask loosely at his side, a faint smile curling the edges of his lips. He had engineered a night of quiet reflection, a universe of subtle absurdity that had softened into tender wonder. Watching the channels fade, he felt something he seldom allowed himself, pride not loud or boastful but quiet and steady. The invention's hum, now barely perceptible, had become a lullaby, a conduit through which the family had experienced not spectacle or adventure, but presence and intimacy. Rick's gaze swept across the room, noting each faint rise and fall of chests, each slow blink of weary eyes, and he recognized softly that tonight he had given something more profound than chaos. Morty's thoughts, still lingering in the threshold of sleep, traced the outlines of gratitude and warmth. The fading glow of the channels mirrored his own internal calm. He understood in a way that felt immediate yet ephemeral that the softest experiences often left the most lasting impressions. The absurdity of the images, once alarming or overwhelming, had gently unraveled into a meditative rhythm. He had witnessed his family together in rare harmony, sharing presence without words, finding connection in gestures, glances, and the simple act of breathing in tandem. Each flicker of light, each muted color, had become a note in a slow, soothing lullaby that reverberated through the room and into his heart. Summer, still partially aware, let out a faint sigh, her hand brushing against the soft blanket covering her legs. She had leaned closer to the screens earlier, curious but uncritical, feeling the pull of the strange and the funny tempered by reflection. Now her breathing had slowed, eyelids heavy as she absorbed the final remnants of absurdity. The fading colors of the channels seemed to dissolve into the room itself, merging with shadows, with the quiet pulse of the house, with the slow, measured rhythm of sleep. The wonder she had felt did not vanish. It became a gentle warmth, a memory she would carry inward, tucked softly into her dreams. Beth, seated near Jerry, closed her eyes fully now. The alternate selves, the branching choices glimpsed in the flickering images, no longer demanded contemplation. Instead, she felt the lesson embedded in their quiet retreat, that life, like the channels, does not need constant attention or analysis to carry meaning. Sometimes it is enough to simply observe, to be present, and to allow experiences to fade naturally, leaving behind only the soft echoes of understanding. She exhaled slowly, feeling the lightness that comes from acceptance and the quiet assurance that imperfection is not failure. Jerry, who had earlier found comfort in the small absurdities, now settled fully into the dimming glow. The ridiculousness that had once caused him uncertainty now carried a soft whisper of reassurance. Even in the most foolish moments, there is place, there is belonging. His chest expanded and contracted in a slow rhythmic pattern, unburdened by expectation. In this dimming, he understood that presence, shared silently with others, is the truest measure of connection. The fading screens, like gentle reminders, mirrored the quiet retreat of his own fears and doubts, leaving a small but steady warmth in their place. The hum of the invention, now a near whisper, melded with the faint breeze drifting through the slightly cracked windows. Outside, stars twinkled in a sky softened by distance, each one a tiny point of light, echoing the channel's now muted glow. The absurdity, the laughter, the quiet awe of the night, all of it receded into memory, leaving only gentle impressions that brushed softly against the heart. Morty, Summer, Beth, and Jerry were each caught in their own private liminal space, half dreaming, half aware, yet entirely present in the room's tender, shared atmosphere. Rick remained a silent sentinel in the corner, eyes softened, noticing the slow collapse of channels into darkness. He recognized the subtle impact of the night, the laughter tempered with sadness, the quiet understanding threading through the family, the shared breath and gaze that carried more meaning than words ever could. In the dimming, he saw the legacy of presence he had engineered. Not dramatic action, not conquest or adventure, but the creation of space where family could exist together, quietly, softly, and safely. A rare private satisfaction rested in his chest, the kind that never needed affirmation or attention. The final flicker of light faded from the channels, leaving only a soft, ambient glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Morty, fully surrendered to sleep now, felt the echoes of the night's absurdity and tenderness intertwine within him. Each fleeting glimpse of impossible worlds, each brief moment of laughter or reflection, became a note in a silent lullaby carried inward. Summer's quiet breath, Beth's serene exhalation, Jerry's gentle rhythm, they all merged into a delicate cadence, a pulse of shared experience that did not require words to be meaningful. Rick finally lowered his flask, watching as the invention's light dimmed to a whisper. The hum persisted, barely audible, a soft reminder of what had been shared. He allowed himself a single private acknowledgement. This night the chaos had become tenderness, absurdity had become lullaby, and family had become presence. It was fleeting, delicate, fragile, but real, and that was enough. In the dimming, Morty's dreams began to absorb fragments of the channels, the man selling doors to nowhere, the cloud raining sandwiches, the balancing creature, all transformed into gentle, abstract shapes, muted in color and rhythm, echoing softly through the subconscious. He would not remember them clearly in the morning, but he would carry the feeling, the warmth, the togetherness, the quiet awe, and the silent gratitude that had nestled deeply in his chest. The house settled into a final rhythm. The soft glow from the invention faded entirely, the hum dissolved into near silence, and the family lay immersed in gentle slumber. Shadows softened into corners, and the faint light from distant stars seeped through the windows, painting everything in the calm, steady hues of night. There was no rush, no urgency, only the lingering echo of shared presence, the gentle imprint of laughter tempered with tenderness, and the quiet reminder that even absurdity could soothe, even chaos could become lullaby. And somewhere in that quiet the room seemed to exhale, carrying the final traces of the night across the household. The channels had gone dark, but their lessons remained. Care without display, presence without demand, tenderness without words. Rick's invention, now silent, had left its mark. The family, bound invisibly by the evening's gentle rhythm, rested in the quiet, safe and warm embrace of each other's existence. The last traces of light disappeared, leaving the room in the soft darkness of night. Morty, Summer, Beth, Jerry and Rick existed together in peace, suspended in time, hearts tethered by invisible threads, the memory of the infinite channels etched lightly into their dreams. It was enough. The room had grown completely still, save for the gentle rhythm of slow, even breathing. The interdimensional channels were now nothing but a memory, their faint glow replaced by the soft ambient light spilling through the curtains, hinting at stars beyond the night sky. Morty lay deeply asleep, body relaxed, his chest rising and falling in a calm, steady pattern. The quiet warmth of the evening lingered in him, weaving into dreams that were not vivid with absurdity, but soft with feeling, a tapestry of togetherness, reflection, and gentle awe. Summer, tucked under a light blanket, had drifted fully into slumber. Her hand rested loosely on the edge of the sofa, fingertips grazing the cushions as if anchoring herself to the shared warmth of the room. In dreams, she felt the odd but comforting presence of the absurd worlds they had glimpsed, now softened into whispers rather than spectacles. She did not need to understand the channels, the laughter, or the strange commercials. She simply existed in the quiet knowledge that the universe, vast and unknowable, had made a space tonight for her to feel safe, seen, and softly important. Beth lay near the corner of the room, her head slightly tilted to one side, the soft rise and fall of her chest marking the rhythm of deep sleep. She had watched herself on the channels, alternate versions of life that might have been, and allowed herself to notice that it was enough simply to exist, simply to be human, simply to breathe in the room with those she loved. The channels had faded, the laughter had dimmed, but the impression remained, a gentle echo of reflection and warmth, leaving her heart lighter than it had been in months. Jerry, nestled further away, had relaxed in a way he rarely allowed himself. Earlier, the absurd channels had whispered to him that even folly had its place, that even simple, foolish laughter could be meaningful. Now those whispers were carried in his steady breathing, a quiet pulse that joined the rhythm of the room. He felt the warmth of presence, of family coexisting in calm without tension or demand. In this fully asleep state, Jerry finally recognized a small, enduring truth. Belonging often exists not in words or deeds, but in shared space, shared time, and shared breaths. Rick, sitting slightly apart, had set aside his flask. He observed the scene with a soft pride almost imperceptible. His eyes traced each relaxed face, each subtle shift of body and limb in sleep. He had created no grand adventure tonight, no peril or spectacle. Instead, he had conjured a night of reflection, laughter tempered by tenderness, absurdity softened into calm, and a family woven together through quiet presence. In the dim light, he realized that these small gestures, the channels, the inventions, the shared silence, had created a gentle sanctuary, a night that would leave its mark in ways words could not capture. The soft hum of the invention had faded into memory, but its effects lingered in the room. The family, caught in sleep's gentle tide, were bound invisibly to one another through the experiences of the evening. Morty's dreams carried the warmth of laughter, tempered by sadness. Summer's slumber held the reflection of curiosity and wonder. Beth's unconscious mind carried the echo of choice and imperfection, and Jerry's rest resonated with the gentle acknowledgement that folly and care could coexist. Even in sleep, the lessons of the night floated lightly through the room, a subtle music of togetherness. The dim light from the stars outside pooled softly across the walls, mingling with the shadows cast by the furniture. In this quiet, every small detail of the room became a note in a lullaby. The soft crease of a blanket, the faint flicker of dust in the light, the almost imperceptible hum of the night itself. The family existed in this shared presence, not as individuals separated by the walls of thought or ego, but as a gentle constellation of lives intertwined by proximity, care, and the quiet rhythm of breathing. The lessons of absurdity, laughter, and reflection had been absorbed, leaving a subtle imprint on hearts that now rested in calm. Morty, in his deep dreams, felt the lingering trace of the channels, creatures balancing stars, clouds raining sandwiches, doors to nowhere, but now these images were gentle shapes muted in color and sound, soft edges that could not startle or alarm. The absurdity of the night had transformed into a lullaby, each fragment a note in a quiet, infinite melody. He did not need to remember the images. He carried only the feeling, the warmth of togetherness, the safety of family, the slow, quiet wonder of being present in this particular room on this particular night. Summer, caught in half-dreams, felt herself fold inward, warmth from the blanket, and the room seeping into her consciousness. The channel's laughter had softened to a whisper, absorbed into her awareness as comfort rather than spectacle. She sensed, without fully knowing, that she was part of something larger, a gentle network of presence, care, and reflection. She breathed slowly, evenly, and the soft rhythm of the night carried her fully into rest. Beth's dreams echoed the gentle, fading laughter of the channels, transformed now into private reflections. The glimpses of alternate selves, choices made and unmade, existed not as judgments or regrets, but as soft, understanding companions. She felt a quiet acceptance in sleep, a knowledge that life's branching paths need not be heavy or overwhelming. They simply are. She exhaled slowly, letting go of the tension she often carried, feeling the soft resonance of presence surrounding her. Jerry, deeply asleep, carried the comforting absurdities within him, each one a reminder that folly could coexist with care. The earlier channels, so ridiculous yet so soothing, had taught him that presence itself, shared silently, is a profound kind of belonging. The family, together yet separate in their slumber, breathed as one, a soft, unspoken rhythm of safety and trust that needed no acknowledgement or articulation. Rick finally allowed himself a sigh, nearly imperceptible, a release that matched the settling of the family around him. He remained awake for a moment longer, watching the soft contours of their sleeping faces, absorbing the subtle warmth of the evening. There was no grand spectacle, no dramatic culmination, only this: a quiet room, a dimmed invention, a family asleep, each heart quietly tethered to the others by shared experience, reflection, and love. He recognized that this night, ordinary in some ways and extraordinary in others, would leave a mark not in memories of action, but in memories of feeling. The soft darkness of the room deepened as the last glimmers of light from outside mingled with shadows. The house exhaled as a whole, settling into the stillness of night. Morty, Summer, Beth, Jerry, and even Rick, despite his wakefulness, were enveloped in a calm that transcended speech or gesture. The lesson of the evening lingered, Even in chaos, in absurdity, in strangeness, there is space for tenderness, for care, for presence. The family, fully asleep now, carried this quiet truth into their dreams, a subtle lullaby that would linger long after the lights had dimmed completely. And as the night pressed gently onward, the house hummed with a delicate quiet, a pulse of life, presence, and love. The family lay fully asleep, each in their own corner, yet bound together in the invisible threads of experienced laughter, reflection, and shared moments. In this shared calm, the universe seemed to whisper its softest secret. Presence is enough. Care is enough, and together, even in silence, hearts can find profound warmth. Rick stepped quietly away from the living room, leaving the family enveloped in the soft cocoon of sleep. The hum of the invention had faded to nothing, the dim glow of the interdimensional channels now entirely gone. Outside, the night sky stretched vast and unbroken, a deep canvas of navy, indigo, and charcoal blue, scattered with the gentle twinkle of distant stars. The air was cool and still, brushing softly against Rick's skin, carrying with it the quiet scent of the evening, the faint warmth of the house, the soft rustle of leaves, and the subtle crispness of night. He carried his flask loosely in one hand, not drinking, but simply holding it as he leaned against the doorway. His eyes swept across the sky, tracing constellations that shimmered faintly against the inky backdrop. There was no rush here, no expectation, only the soft, deliberate act of observation. For once, Rick allowed himself to notice the small details. The subtle glow of a nearby street lamp, reflected faintly against the windows, the way the stars twinkled in uneven rhythms, and the gentle chorus of nocturnal life in the distance. He stood alone, yet not lonely, because the warmth of the sleeping family lingered like a quiet, tangible tether. In the stillness, Rick's mind wandered to the events of the night. The absurdity of the interdimensional channels, the fleeting glimpses of impossible worlds, the laughter tempered with quiet reflection. They had all been orchestrated not as entertainment, but as a conduit for care. He had watched his family absorb the strangeness, allowing themselves to feel awe, amusement, and even tenderness, without judgment. The glow of the invention, now extinguished, had left behind more than memories of images. It had left traces of presence, subtle imprints on the hearts of those he rarely saw at their most vulnerable. Rick recognized softly that his role tonight had been quiet yet significant, a creator not of chaos, but of comfort. He shifted slightly, inhaling deeply, letting the night fill his lungs. The stars overhead seemed almost like silent companions, witnesses to the quiet miracle that had unfolded inside the house. He whispered softly, words meant only for the night. "You see them, don't you? The quiet, the laughter, the little heartbeats of this strange family I somehow care for." His voice was low, reverent, carried on the night breeze without urgency or expectation. It was a private acknowledgement, a rare moment of honesty that even he had not granted himself in many years. Rick's gaze softened as he thought of Morty, curled on the sofa, lost in dreams that carried fragments of the night's absurdities. Morty had absorbed not only the comedy and strangeness, but the subtler lessons of empathy and presence. Rick realized that the boy's gentle curiosity and quiet attentiveness had been the invisible thread that connected them all tonight. Summer, Beth, and Jerry, too, each had experienced a rare union of reflection and wonder, each quietly tethered to one another by the shared rhythms of breath, gaze, and laughter. Rick, observing from the night's edge, allowed himself to appreciate the profound simplicity of it all. He took a slow step forward, settling onto the soft grass of the backyard. The earth beneath him was cool but grounding, anchoring him to the present. Above, the stars blinked in calm, uneven patterns, each one a silent echo of the channel's earlier glow. The night was vast, but Rick felt a strange intimacy in its expanse, a feeling that even the infinite universe, in its untouchable enormity, could carry small moments of tenderness and care. He allowed himself a quiet smile, the corners of his lips curling ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly. Rick lifted his flask, turning it over in his hand, reflecting on the quiet legacy of the night. It was not heroic in the traditional sense, not marked by grand gestures or daring feats, but heroic in its subtlety. He had created a space where absurdity and tenderness could coexist, where laughter could mingle with reflection, and where the family could exist together without expectation or performance. It was in its quiet way a small miracle, a soft imprint that might endure longer than any cosmic adventure or scientific breakthrough. As he leaned back, letting the grass cradle him, Rick's eyes traced the edges of the sky once more. The constellations seemed to pulse gently, as if breathing with the same rhythm as the house behind him. He imagined the faint hum of the invention still lingering in the subconscious of the family, a gentle lullaby echoing through their dreams. Morty dreaming of strange worlds and tender connections. Summer absorbed in quiet wonder. Beth reflecting softly on alternate lives. And Jerry carrying the comforting absurdities in his heart, all of them bound together in a fragile yet undeniable unity. Rick closed his eyes briefly, letting the stillness seep into him. For once there was no sarcasm, no impatience, no rush to correct or manipulate. He simply existed, a solitary observer under the stars, witnessing the gentle consequences of care and presence. The night carried with it a kind of soft wisdom, not spoken or written, but felt, an awareness that small acts of tenderness can ripple quietly across hearts, leaving marks that endure far beyond the fleeting glow of a channel or the laughter of a moment. The stars reflected in his eyes, soft points of light mirrored by faint, lingering emotions. Rick whispered again, softer this time, almost a hum rather than words. They're safe. They're together, and for tonight that is enough. He allowed the night to stretch around him, the cool air, the distant sounds, the faint scent of earth and grass. Even in the vastness of the universe, in the shadow of infinity, there was a place carved out for quiet reflection, for care, for love in its most subtle, unspoken forms. Rick tilted his head back, gazing upward into the expanse above. The stars were countless, some bright, some faint, all steady in their own way. He felt the rhythm of the night settle into him, a gentle cadence that matched the heartbeat of the house, the breaths of his sleeping family, and the soft echoes of the channels that had once filled the room. The absurdity and strangeness of the evening had given way to calm, reflection and quiet awe, leaving him with a rare sensation, peace. In that stillness, he allowed himself one final thought, a private acknowledgement to the stars and the night air. He had done more than watch or invent. He had created a small sanctuary. And in the sanctuary of presence, laughter, and quiet care, even chaos could become gentle, even absurdity could soothe, and even a fractured family could feel whole. The realization was soft, almost imperceptible, but real, a warmth carried in the chest, not needing display or confirmation. Rick took a slow, deliberate sip from his flask, not for any need, but simply as a companion to the night's calm. He lingered, breathing, observing, listening, feeling. The family remained asleep inside, the house humming gently with life, and the universe stretched endlessly overhead, vast but intimate, silent but full of subtle voices. He understood in a way he seldom allowed himself that he had left a quiet mark on the night, one that might linger in dreams, memories, and hearts for days, months, or perhaps even years. Finally, Rick exhaled a long, soft breath that seemed to release not only the night's tension, but also a part of himself he rarely shared. He leaned back into the grass, eyes still tracing the stars, and whispered into the darkness. And somewhere they are still out there, half asleep before an endless screen of stars. The words were both a farewell and a promise, a recognition of the night's gentle, enduring imprint. He stayed for a while longer, quiet, present, and still. The stars, the night, the sleeping house, all became part of a single, delicate rhythm, a lullaby without words, a soft exhale of the universe. And in that silence, Rick felt it, the quiet satisfaction of a night spent not in conquest or chaos, but in care, presence, and subtle wonder. The house lay bathed in the faint glow of early dawn, though the night still lingered in gentle shadows across the walls. Morty's dreams carried the remnants of the interdimensional channels, flashes of impossible creatures, soft colors that seemed to hum with gentle absurdity, and fragments of commercials that were more lullabies than messages. Yet the images themselves were secondary. The feelings they inspired had settled deep within him, curling like warm light around his chest. He felt the memory of the laughter, the subtle blend of joy and wistfulness, and he realized that even in the absence of clarity, the warmth of the night endured. In his dreams, Morty floated lightly among shapes that made no sense and yet felt familiar. Clouds shaped like sandwiches drifted past, doors led to nowhere and everywhere simultaneously, and voices whispered soft nonsense that tickled without alarming. The rhythm of the night carried him gently, the memory of the evening wrapping around him as securely as a blanket. He felt, in ways words could never convey, the enduring presence of his family, each one cradled by their own shared experiences, and each of them tethered to him by invisible threads of care, laughter, and reflection. Summer's slumber reflected similar quiet impressions. Although her dreams were her own, the influence of the channels lingered in soft tones and shapes, whispering notions of curiosity and gentle wonder. She had felt in the glow of the television that her presence alone mattered, that she did not need to sharpen her words, to judge, or to perform. The memory of the channels had given her a rare gift, the knowledge that to simply observe, to simply exist in a moment of shared strangeness, is enough. The absurdities she had glimpsed were now quiet companions, gentle friends guiding her toward a sense of calm she seldom allowed herself in waking life. Beth, half awake in her dreams, wandered through corridors of her own making, each lined with faint echoes of the alternate selves she had glimpsed on the channels. These figures did not speak or judge. They simply existed, like silent mirrors reflecting choices and possibilities without consequence. She felt the subtle weight of understanding settle in her chest, a knowing that life's branching rivers, the decisions and divergences, need not be overwhelming. Even in dreams, Beth recognized that the channels had taught her a quiet truth. Existence itself, lived with attention and care, is enough. The memory of the evening lingered soft and luminous, leaving her heart lighter, her mind quieter. Jerry, deeply asleep, carried fragments of the night in a different way. The ridiculous skits and commercials that had once made him feel marginal and awkward now existed as gentle affirmations. Even folly, even laughter at absurdity could create belonging. He felt the subtle resonance of connection in his dreams, a quiet pulse of warmth emanating from his own recognition of place within the family. For once he did not feel excluded, did not feel small. He was present, part of a living constellation of shared moments and laughter, floating safely in the soft hum of the night's memory. Rick, awake and still under the stars, watched the first hints of dawn stretch across the horizon. He thought of the family asleep within, each of them cradled by the invisible glow of the evening's shared experiences. The channels had faded, the absurdity had dissipated, yet their essence remained in ways subtle and profound. He imagined the memory of infinite channels persisting in their dreams, not as chaotic visuals but as gentle, echoing lullabies of connection and reflection. The night had left a mark, not on the world at large, but on the quiet spaces of hearts open to warmth and presence. He took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the cool morning air mix with the residual warmth of the night. Rick's mind traced the contours of the evening, recalling the family gathered, the laughter tempered with sadness, the fleeting yet enduring moments of unity. The absurd channels had been more than entertainment. They had been vessels for tenderness, each fragment carrying a small, unspoken lesson. Even chaos can soothe, even nonsense can comfort, and even a fractured family can feel the subtle threads of unity in the quiet. Morty's subconscious carried the essence of what had been shared. He felt, without fully understanding, the gentle tug of awareness, that the laughter, the absurdity, the moments of reflection had all contributed to a rare harmony within the home. Though the images of the channels would fade, the emotional imprint lingered, a quiet echo of warmth that would remain long after waking. Each laugh, each pause, each fleeting moment of recognition and care had accumulated into something larger, a quiet tapestry woven from threads of empathy, humor, and subtle wonder. Summer's dreams mirrored this sentiment, carrying the gentle resonance of belonging and observation. She felt herself entwined with the channels, the family, and the night, a part of something expansive yet intimate. The lessons were implicit yet tangible. Curiosity can coexist with calm, presence can coexist with chaos, and engagement need not demand comprehension to carry meaning. She drifted lightly through her dreams, floating in a haze of soft colors, gentle sounds, and the faint sense of infinite possibility, the memory of the channels lingering as a gentle guide, a subtle anchor for the heart. Beth, similarly, absorbed the quiet truths of the evening. The alternate selves, the branching rivers of choices, and the muted laughter of the channels all contributed to a growing sense of calm and acceptance. Even in sleep, she recognized that her life's complexity need not be a burden, It could be a soft unfolding journey, appreciated in its quiet moments. She exhaled in her dreams. The tension of responsibility and expectation lifted, replaced by the gentle awareness that she was. At her core, enough Jerry, in his own unconscious space, continued to feel the residual echoes of absurdity, laughter, and connection. The channels had reminded him that even silliness has its place, that even in the simplest, most ridiculous moments, meaning can be found. The memory of the evening's shared experience had left a quiet, comforting imprint, a sense that presence itself could be significant. He floated gently in dreams, held by the knowledge that belonging need not be loud or obvious, only quietly, tenderly present. Rick, observing the horizon now streaked with pale pinks and fading blues, allowed a small smile to touch his lips. The night had been an experiment not of science, but of care. The channels had served as vessels of subtle reflection, laughter, and emotional resonance. And now, as dawn hinted at the return of day, Rick understood that the memory of these infinite channels, soft, absurd, reflective, would remain in the hearts of his family long after the lights and hum had faded. He whispered to himself, a private acknowledgement carried on the morning breeze. They carry it now. The laughter, the warmth, the quiet, strange beauty of it all. His words were not for acknowledgement or praise, but simply an observation of fact. The night's gifts had been absorbed, internalized, and would ripple quietly through the day. Unseen but profoundly felt, the stars above lingered faintly, still twinkling even as the horizon brightened. Rick leaned back slightly, allowing the grass beneath him to support his weight. The air was alive with gentle possibility, infused with the residual energy of the night. The memory of the channels, infinite yet intimate, echoed softly in his mind. He had left a quiet, enduring imprint, not through force or manipulation, but through subtle care, presence, and reflection. As the first birds began their tentative songs in the distance, Rick exhaled once more, a soft, deliberate sigh. He allowed himself to feel the quiet pride, the gentle satisfaction of a night well spent. The channels were gone, the family remained asleep, and the universe stretched overhead, vast yet intimate, infinite yet softly tethered to the hearts of those he cherished. Rick stood slowly, taking a measured breath, and whispered again, almost as if speaking to the stars themselves, even in absurdity, even in chaos, there can be warmth. Even in laughter and strangeness, there can be comfort. He paused, listening to the soft sounds of morning and the faint hum of life within the house. The memory of infinite channels had been absorbed, a subtle, enduring lullaby, and he felt its quiet power in the depths of the night, now giving way to dawn. And in that calm, Rick knew the family would carry this night with them quietly, subtly, enduringly. The channels would fade from memory, but the feelings, the warmth, the laughter tempered with reflection, the shared presence would remain. A soft exhale of the universe, a lullaby whispered into the hearts of those he loved. The house slept quietly, bathed in the faint pre-dawn glow that filtered softly through the windows. The night outside was slowly surrendering its navy and indigo cloak to pale strokes of morning light, yet inside, the air remained infused with the gentle remnants of yesterday's wonder. The interdimensional channels, now silent, had left behind more than fleeting images. They had etched subtle impressions of comfort, laughter, and reflection into the hearts of those who had watched. Morty, Summer, Beth, and Jerry rested soundly, each curled in their own corner, each gently tethered to the others by the quiet magic of shared presence. Rick moved through the dim living room with slow, deliberate steps. The hum of the invention had ceased entirely, yet he hesitated, his eyes tracing the soft contours of the furniture, the way the blankets fell over the sofas, and the faint shimmer of moonlight still lingering in patches across the floor. The family's breaths rose and fell in unison, soft and steady. Rick's usual restlessness had been tempered tonight by the weight of his own quiet reflection. For once he felt the subtle pull of care, the gentle tug of responsibility not imposed but chosen, a recognition that his actions, no matter how small, could leave an enduring warmth behind. He knelt near the now dormant invention, fingers lightly brushing its smooth surface. The device had been created to open windows into absurd, chaotic worlds, yet tonight it had served a gentler purpose. It had been a cradle for dreams, a bridge to connection, a subtle reminder that even in the strangeness of existence, care and warmth could flourish. Rick allowed himself a rare moment of acknowledgement. The channels had not been about distraction or chaos. They had been about love expressed quietly, imperceptibly yet powerfully. Careful not to disturb the sleeping family, Rick adjusted the faint glow of the screen to its lowest setting. Not enough to awaken them, but enough to emit a tender luminescence, a soft hum that seemed to cradle the room. It was not a light for reading or attention. It was a comfort, a nightlight that carried the residue of the laughter, the shared curiosity and the absurd tenderness of the evening. Rick stood back observing the effect. A room bathed in subtle color, faint reflections dancing over the walls, a gentle companion to the dreamscape that his family was still inhabiting. Rick's gaze lingered on Morty first. The boy slept curled on the sofa, one arm tucked beneath his head, the other draped loosely over a pillow. Rick's chest warmed slightly at the sight. Morty had absorbed the night with quiet curiosity, his empathy stretched by the absurdity and tenderness of the channels. Rick had watched him learn that laughter and sadness could coexist, that strangeness could be gentle, and that even chaotic absurdity could be a vessel for care. He smiled faintly, a soft expression that rarely appeared unprompted, and whispered, "Sleep well, Morty. You've earned it." Summer's soft breathing drew Rick's attention next. She lay on the other sofa, knees tucked to her chest, a light blanket draped over her. The channels had sparked a quiet fascination in her, a rare suspension of judgment and critique. Tonight, she had felt the simple joy of observation, the understated satisfaction of presence without performance. Rick admired the way she had softened, even if just slightly, allowing the gentle absurdities of the channels to touch her. Without disturbing her slumber, he reached down and gently straightened the blanket, a silent gesture of care that went unnoticed, but resonated in the room's warmth. Beth's rest was deep, serene. She had glimpsed herself in alternate versions on the channels, not perfect, not broken, but human, endlessly branching in her choices and reflections. She now rested in the quiet knowledge that life's rivers need not be feared, only observed and gently followed. Rick lingered near her, observing the soft rise and fall of her chest, the gentle curve of a hand draped over the side of the bed. He allowed himself a rare thought, that even when he felt distant, even when sarcasm and cynicism were his shield, his care had reached her. The channels had been a conduit, and in that quiet moment, he acknowledged the subtle success of his kindness. Jerry, too, slept in his own space, comforted by the lingering traces of absurdity. Even he, often lost in self-doubt or overlooked by the family, had been touched by the gentle humor and tenderness of the evening. Rick looked down at him, imagining the faint echoes of soft laughter still resonating in his subconscious. For once, Jerry felt a sense of belonging, however quiet or fleeting, and Rick silently approved. He realized that sometimes the smallest gestures, leaving the faint glow of the invention, allowing absurdity to be tender, witnessing without intrusion, were enough to sustain connection and warmth. Rick moved to the center of the room, surveying the family and the quiet aftermath of the night's interdimensional journey. He allowed a soft, almost imperceptible smile to linger on his lips, feeling the weight and the lightness of his secret care. No words were needed. No acknowledgement was sought. The act of kindness existed in its own space, subtle and enduring, a thread woven into the fabric of the night. Rick felt the rhythm of the house, the gentle cadence of breathing and presence, and allowed himself a quiet exhale. A release of tension he rarely permitted himself. He thought back to the absurdity of the channels themselves, the floating sandwiches, doors to nowhere, and whispers of strange, impossible worlds. But he also thought of the laughter softened by reflection, the glimmers of connection, and the tender bonds that had briefly solidified in the glow of his invention. The contrast between chaos and comfort had never been so clear to him. For once, Rick realized that creation need not always be grand or dangerous. It could be quiet, subtle, and infinitely more profound. He had left a gift, invisible yet deeply felt, in the simplest of forms, presence, light, and enduring warmth. As the first hints of sunlight stretched across the horizon, painting the room with gentle tones of pale yellow and soft lavender, Rick allowed himself one final act. He adjusted the invention ever so slightly, ensuring its faint glow would continue without disruption, a tender lullaby for the sleeping family. Then, with a deliberate, measured breath, he stepped back, observing the quiet, glowing room from the threshold. The night's work was complete, and in its completion lay a profound sense of satisfaction. Rick stood there for a long moment, absorbing the serenity that his actions had created. The hum of the house, the residual traces of laughter, and the lingering warmth of shared presence coalesced into a soft, almost tangible feeling. He realized gently and without fanfare that kindness need not be announced or witnessed to hold value. Sometimes the most significant gestures are those carried out in silence, unnoticed, yet woven into the lives of those we care for in ways that endure longer than memory or attention. Finally, Rick exhaled, a low, deliberate sigh that carried both relief and quiet pride. He glanced one last time at his family, the faint light reflecting softly on their peaceful faces. The invention hummed just enough to cradle them in its residual warmth, an enduring testament to the night's subtle miracles. He whispered softly, almost a lullaby to himself in the room. "Sleep well. I'll be here even if you don't know it." And with that, he allowed the soft comfort of the moment to linger, a gentle, invisible embrace across the sleeping forms before him. Rick left the room quietly, stepping into the early morning with a heart unexpectedly light. He had given the family a night of strange wonder, gentle laughter and quiet reflection, but more importantly, he had given them care in its most subtle, enduring form. He walked into the morning light, carrying the knowledge that even in absurdity, even in chaos, the smallest gestures of attention and kindness could ripple quietly across hearts, leaving imprints far deeper than words or actions ever could. And in the soft glow of the day's first light, Rick smiled again, whispering to the fading night, "Even when unseen, even when unspoken, kindness is never wasted." The invention hummed softly behind him, a quiet companion, a cradle for the dreams of those he loved. The house was silent, steeped in a fragile peace that seemed to stretch beyond walls, into the quiet night that still lingered, despite the hint of dawn. Outside, the world remained hushed, wrapped in the soft indigo of pre-morning, where the stars, fading slowly, still whispered their light across the sky. Inside, the family slept together yet separately, each cocooned in their own dreams, bound subtly by the shared experience of the night. The memory of infinite channels lingered, not as images or spectacles, but as a tender, unspoken lullaby echoing across the rooms and hearts alike. Morty drifted lightly in his dream, a faint smile touching his lips. The shapes, the laughter, the quiet absurdities of the channels now seemed distant yet familiar, like fragments of a story he could not fully recall, but whose warmth remained intact. He felt a gentle resonance, a comforting hum in the core of his being, as if the universe itself had exhaled just for him, allowing him a moment of rest unspoiled by worry or expectation. The laughter, softened by reflection, the tiny lessons hidden in absurdity, all lingered like distant constellations, guiding him gently through the dreamscape. Summer, nearby, felt the same subtle tether of calm. She floated through her subconscious with an unusual ease, the channel's absurdities reframed in her mind not as chaos, but as quiet stories of existence, humor, and curiosity. She felt herself untethered from the constant scrutiny and self-consciousness that usually accompanied her presence. Tonight she did not need to perform or judge. She merely existed, wrapped in the soft glow of the hum that lingered, absorbing the warmth, letting it seep into the quiet corners of her heart. The memory of the channels, of the subtle absurdities and laughter, had left her calmer, softer, and quietly content. Beth, too, wandered gently through dreams, shaped by reflections of her own choices, and the faint echoes of alternative selves she had glimpsed on the channels. These images, once potentially jarring or self-critical, were now soothing, like distant lanterns flickering in the fog. She recognized the beauty not in perfection, but in the very act of being, of existing, and of navigating life with awareness, love, and subtle reflection. Even the absurd and impossible elements of the channels had transformed into something tender, something that whispered softly of empathy, care, and understanding. Jerry, often left outside the warmth of attention or confidence, now slept wrapped in the subtle affirmation of his place. The channel's ridiculous moments, absurdly comforting, had reminded him that even folly could have value, even laughter at oneself could create belonging. He felt the soft exhale of the universe, a calm assurance that the quiet small moments, missteps, clumsiness, shared smiles, were enough. In his dreams, the echoes of absurd humor and gentle laughter coalesced into an almost physical comfort, a sense of connection that had eluded him more often than not. Rick, standing at the threshold of the house, observed the quiet unity of the sleeping family. He traced the faint glimmers of moonlight on their faces and on the faintly glowing invention in the corner. For once he allowed himself to linger, to recognize the subtle beauty of what he had created, not a device to manipulate, not a tool of chaos, but a vessel of quiet wonder. He realized that the night had been more than just an experiment. It had been a gift, a shared reflection, a soft, intangible thread of connection that would outlast the fading glow of any channel or invention. The hum of the device remained barely audible, like a lullaby whispering into the room, cradling the family in its residual warmth. Rick leaned against the doorway, flask in hand, inhaling deeply. The weight of silence pressed not oppressively, but softly, like a blanket layered over the world, quieting even the restless tendencies of his own mind. He thought of the absurdity, the laughter, the bittersweet moments scattered through the night, and allowed himself a rare, almost imperceptible sense of satisfaction. He had not shouted, not demanded attention, not imposed. He had simply created a space for wonder, and that was enough. The channels had done their work, not through chaos, but through subtle resonance. The laughter, the absurd commercials, the fleeting glimpses of other selves and other worlds, they had been mirrors of emotion rather than spectacle. And now their echoes had permeated the room, leaving a gentle imprint in the form of safety, comfort, and shared experience. The family, unaware of the precise depth of influence, rested more fully because of the channels, more deeply connected because of the quiet reflection they had inspired. Rick's mind wandered back to Morty and Summer and Beth and Jerry. He realized that presence itself had been the greatest gift, being there, watching, and allowing the experience to unfold without interference. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest gestures, leaving the device humming at low light, observing quietly, adjusting a blanket without waking anyone, could echo far more profoundly than any grandiose invention or explosive spectacle. It was the subtlety, the unspoken care that carried the weight of meaning, and tonight had been filled with it. The first hints of morning crept in, soft and pale, brushing against the walls and furniture. Yet the room remained infused with a sense of night lingering, a delicate tension between darkness and light that felt almost sacred. Rick took one final look, allowing himself to imprint the moment in memory. The sleeping family, the faint glow of the invention, the lingering hum of the absurd and tender channels. It was an ordinary scene made extraordinary by the invisible threads of care, empathy and quiet humor that tied them all together. Rick whispered, softly, a phrase carried on the dawn wind, almost to himself, almost to the universe. Even in absurdity, even in chaos, there can be a lullaby. Even in strangeness, even in nonsense, there can be warmth. His words were not a declaration. They were a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition of the subtle influence of care and reflection, a note of gratitude to the night, to the channels, and to the family who had absorbed them so tenderly. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, lingering with the soft exhale of the universe. Rick stayed for a moment longer, watching the room, listening to the gentle cadence of breathing, to the faint hum of the channel's memory. The world outside could wait. Here now in the quiet, all was calm, all was held, all was enough. He recognized that the essence of the night, the laughter tempered with bittersweet reflection, the warmth carried in subtle gestures, the quiet unity of a family, was more enduring than any image or sound the channels could provide. Finally, Rick turned away, stepping softly toward the threshold of dawn. He paused once, glancing back at the softly glowing room, and whispered one last time a lullaby and a promise woven together. And somewhere they are still out there, half asleep, before an endless screen of stars. The words were not for recognition, not for gratitude. They existed to mark the culmination of care, reflection, and subtle love, carried quietly across the hearts of those who had witnessed the night's unfolding. And then, quietly, he let himself go, stepping into the new day with a rare, gentle smile, a heart unexpectedly light. and a mind filled with the soft assurance that the universe, for all its chaos and strangeness, had exhaled in tandem with him and the family, leaving warmth in its wake. The night had ended, but its gentle imprint lingered, like a tender hum that would ripple through dreams, quietly and enduringly. And with that, the story settles, the channels fade completely, the house breathes its calm, and the universe exhales. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.